The big questions, that's kind of an amorphous phrase, so I didn't mean to put you on the spot, Brian, by saying you're going to introduce the big questions. There are lots of big questions informing this. I mean, I guess the big question is why emo, why Latino emo? And really this became a question for me, or a sort of personal question, a research question for me in 2008. In the spring of 2008, when emo kids across Mexico were attacked in these really violent riots by other youth subcultural groups in big metropolitan cities. And I want to start by just giving you a taste of what that was like. I'm gonna show some footage from a Mexican TV station, and this footage is in Spanish, but that's okay, I'll gloss.
You don't have the sound plug in?
It is, but it's not. Can you guys hear it? So what we're seeing here is footage from an attack in Querétaro, and the attackers organized over the internet, and they were inspired by this VJ on Mexican MTV who had a little anti-emo rant. That was the original inspiration. And it's violent. You can see the police had to come in and break it up, and that one kid that they interview, he says, oh, you know, the emos don't bother me, even if they do kind of look more like girls than boys, it's fine. So emo, which is known by the same name in the United States, it has its etymological root in emotional, and young people who identify as such do so because, as one Mexican journalist put it, their philosophy is to act in accordance with their emotions and feelings. So the public perception of emo in Mexico, the public perception in Mexico of emo as a US phenomenon, fuels Mexican hostility towards it, though commentators and participants in the attacks have attributed the violence there to a range of causes, from ideological differences over cultural production to homophobia to an attempt to divert attention away from national crises in education and employment. The bulk of hostilities towards emos in Mexico seems to stem from the widespread assumption that they have no appreciable philosophy. So because their fashion styles and musical tastes are so heavily influenced by US markets, emos are roundly criticized for participating in a meaningless cultural performance. So their gestures are not entirely empty though, but their meaning is difficult to parse. Attempting to explain why people feel such antipathy towards them, Eric, this isn't Eric, this is just a random picture of an emo, but Eric did say this. A Mexican emo told a reporter, well, I don't really know. Sometimes we flaunt our emotions or we make them more dramatic. So while on the one hand it's really tempting to read this public emotion as a mode of resistance to the privatizing moves of multinational capital, in recent years there's been a critical backlash to those kinds of readings of feeling. So society, the argument goes, it needs deviance to reify its norms. Emotional communities like the Mexican emos are maintained through market forces that create and manage their difference to the states of benefit. So the state needs this kind of resistance, the argument goes. Since they have no expressly political philosophy, the emos cannot be, in this argument, they cannot be acting with any kind of social awareness, and so they must be acting within societal norms. They're acting out in a way that's acceptable. In sociological terms, we want to use kind of academic words, which I guess I'm using a lot of, that's my role in this, what's the word? It's not a trio, quartet. My role in this quartet is to lead off with some kind of academic structure that then will become deconstructed and made more fun as the afternoon wears on. So in sociological terms, we might say that the emos are acting structurally rather than agentically, that they're just acting out, in these socially acceptable ways, and that they don't pose any real challenge or mean anything really important. But this feels a little dismissive to me, because even if they're not self-consciously political, their musical and stylistic communities can tell us something. A Mexican emo resonates transnationally with some of the stuff that Brian was just talking to us about, with the histories of punk and new wave, specifically in Chicano communities. And these histories that we got a little taste of in Brian's talk, these histories ground youth subcultures that might otherwise seem anomalous, like Mexican emo and British singer Stephen Morrissey's enormous popularity with US Latinos. So these histories, the histories of punk and new wave, they ground these subcultures that might seem disconnected, and they ground them in this genealogy of public performances of emotion. So reading both of these trends that I just mentioned, Morrissey's fans and the Mexican emos, reading them both in conjunction with Dahlia Season, which was Miriam Gerba's collection of short fiction. It came out in 2007. And Nikki, this was the collection that I said your work actually reminded me of quite a bit. So I'm gonna read these three together. Her fiction is about queer Chicano emo communities in Southern California. And when we think about these three things together, then a fuller picture of Mexican emo's use value begins to emerge. So each of these three things that I was just talking about, Gerba's writing, Morrissey's Latino fans, and Mexican emo, is about alternately Latino belonging and ostracization from broad national and global communities. While Gerba's protagonist, Desiree, along with Mexican emos, can be understood as acting structurally, and again, that's like within social norms, a kind of acceptable resistance. Morrissey's US Latino fans operate with a self-consciousness rendering their action fairly agentic, so they're self-consciously resistant. A difference that sheds light on what emo can mean in a transnational context. You'll see that picture there in the middle is of one of our speakers this afternoon. Of course, that's José Maldonado. And this is my overall project in looking at these three texts, the novella, the violence, and Morrissey's Latino fans. I'm offering some thoughts on what emo might mean in the context of a transnational Latinidad. And even saying that, like, what emo might mean is kind of complicated because emo means different things, decidedly different things to different constituencies. And when Brian said he's not really sure what emo means, he's not alone, nobody's really sure. It's generally regarded as an emotional subset of punk. Now, punk, as many of you know, has been widely studied in the British context as an expression of working class angst and alienation during the administration of Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, who was Prime Minister from 1979 to 1990. Emo, on the other hand, is regarded, even by bands who are labeled as emo, it's regarded as a meaningless corporate label, the commodification of punk's overt social consciousness. Despite that social consciousness, though, punk's overt social consciousness, punk has, however, always had an ambiguous relationship with race. And the majority of scholarly analyses of punk's racial antagonism, however, are predicated on the erasure of punks of color from musical history. With very few exceptions, the history and significance of Chicana and Latina, Chicano and Latino punk is rarely recognized in studies of the genre, and race, if it's discussed at all, it usually refers to African Americans or to white punk's own racial anxieties. But as Michel Abel-Khayan's work in Locomotion reveals, and that's on the cover there, that's Teresa Covarrubias, who Brian was just talking about, and her band, The Brat. This is a great book, Locomotion. Michelle Haddad-Payan reveals that brown punk did exist, and it addressed social inequality and racism, forming cross-cultural alliances amongst a really diverse body of artists. And this is kind of easy for me to wrap my head around, the seizing of punk aesthetics to further racial justice. That's understandable. But the Chicana and Latina embrace of emo is a little bit less clear. And that suggests to me that Anglo and Chicano emo signifies differently, and moreover that US Latino emo differs from the emo street styles that we're seeing in Mexico. So in both the US and Mexican contexts, appreciation of emo music signals cultural imperialism. It's the visible emblem of a transnational economic colonialism. And this argument has a long been a feature of discussions of rock music in Latin America, however, and it's not specific to emo. The stigma of cultural imperialism attached to rock music has never been fully transcended, despite the fact that there are these rich, homegrown rock en español scenes today, and punk across Latin America. Although there may be widespread criticism of emo as a foreign import, the debate amongst Mexican youth in kind of online chat forums about what constitutes real Mexican emo, and we were seeing some real Mexican emo in the video loop that we were watching earlier, and we'll play that again during the break. So real Mexican emo and this debate around what it is, that suggests that some do view emo as a native genre, though these debates are characterized by a clear class antagonism that appears to fuel much of the anti-emo violence. So the majority of Mexican emos are young teens who are comfortably situated in Mexico's upper middle classes. Ultimately, however, these attacks against emos, these attacks are not primarily about class, about who listens to better music, or who has more valid political goals. They are, in my reading at any rate, they are about the meaning of sentiment and affect in the public sphere. The problem with Mexican emos is not that they have feelings or that they flaunt their difference. The problem with Mexican emos is that they feel the wrong things. As an anonymous reader wrote to La Jornada, depression is a sickness, not an ideology. It's not healthy to cut yourself to be cool. This is somebody commenting on one of the articles about the attacks online. So they feel publicly, or alternately, they're criticized for having no feelings at all, or for simply succumbing to a transnational commodity culture. Again, this sort of empty performance. The emo's depressive affect and their explicit rejection of the political render them, to a certain extent, unmanageable within the Mexican system of recognizable groups. So they seem different. Mexico has punks, they have metalheads, they have their own version of hippies, but emos don't fit. So the reaction against them can be read not as a top-down repression of revolutionary feeling, but the public's own self-censorship of the juxtapolitical. Here's another instance of hyper-academic speak. Just for a minute, bear with me. So Lauren Berlant explains this word, the juxtapolitical, as a largely aesthetic realm that operates with an awareness of, but not in direct relation to the political. And the juxtapolitical is something that grounds intimate communities that shore up the individual's desire for normalcy. Mexican emo's intimate publics deploy a strikingly feminine or androgynous personal aesthetic whose supposed deviation from the norm has clearly hit a Mexican nerve. Emo's jeans and black eyeliner are deemed unsightly for young women, but altogether unacceptable for young men. Androgynous emo fashion creates a very powerful image in Mexico of emo as queer culture and has led to very heated debates over emo sexual identity. So while some emos are queer identified, many are not and resent the association. We could unpack that in another time. So if Mexican emos by and large don't identify as queer, and if their fashion choices don't necessarily correspond to homosexual behavior, then how are we to understand everything that's going on? How are we to understand their gender play, their provocation of Mexico's heteronormative patriarchy, and what, furthermore, is the relationship between their queer pretensions and the desire for normalcy that Berlant says is grounds of the juxtapolitical. So put another way, the Mexican emo's playful flirtation with queer signification their intense individualism, their rejection of communal political goals. It begs the question of what happens at the intersection of emo, queerness, and Mexicanidad. So what happens when we bring those three things together? And we see those three things come together here in this collection of short fiction. Dahlia Season productively explores that intersection with a queer Chicano protagonist, Desiree Garcia, who shares the musical and fashion sensibilities of the Mexican emos, creating a transnational trajectory of queer emo Mexicanidad. Now the novella opens the summer before Desiree is to begin high school, and her parents send her to Guadalajara to spend her break with relatives, or as she puts it, to knock some Mexican sense into her. The rest of the novella traces the effects of that trip as Desiree negotiates her her identity as an Americanized member of a fringe subculture in relation to her Mexican cousins, as well as her identity as a Mexican goth or Chicana goth in her largely Anglo-US high school. And Desiree moves back and forth between the US and Mexico throughout Dahlia Season, and these travels set up the novella's exploration of boundaries between people, between countries, between languages, bodies, minds. And at the end of the day, this novella is very much about borders, with Desiree negotiating the space between her Mexican family, the Chicano nerds that are her parents, what she calls them, Chicano nerds, and her Anglo friends. And negotiating this space is difficult for her, exceedingly difficult because of her undiagnosed obsessive compulsive disorder and her Tourette's syndrome, which rage uncontrolled until after she's graduated from college. So Dahlia Season is also about bodies as much as it is about borders. It investigates the language of the body, and it explores how the body registers emotional and geopolitical dislocation. So in this, the novella's characters have a lot in common with the Mexican emos who deploy their bodies as a means of finding their way and establishing their place in a complex global marketplace. Although Dahlia Season's bodies represent cultural and political conflict, those bodies and the borders that divide them are mediated through language and performance. And this emphasis on language presents the novella with an unresolved paradox. So Desiree attempts to free herself from the constraints of language through her body, but that embrace of her body can only be expressed through language. And that suggests that her freedom is not as liberating as she thinks it is. It's ultimately an illusion. And language in the novel is both a core element of culture as well as a means to resist culture. So she resists the ways in which others write her, Desiree does, but that resistance can only be expressed through the very language that she's trying to refute. And the novella attempts to resolve this conflict with an image of Desiree. At the end of the story, she's quit her job as a stripper in order to become an ESL teacher, where, quote, demonstrating verbs on her hands and knees, pretending to be an exotic noun, Desiree is usually too busy to be interrupted by tics. And this blending of body and language that we get in Desiree's performance of words to her students invokes a certain freedom from the controlling discourses that surround her, but that freedom comes from embracing an alternate set of institutional discourses that manage her difference, like the explanations that she finds in this self-help book that her girlfriend Ray gives her. And her relationship with Ray enacts a similar kind of conventionality. So she abandons life as a stripper, which is a profession that she describes as being populated by mentally ill women. She abandons that life for staid, lesbian, domestic bliss. And Dahlia Season's staging of queerness and physicality as sites of resistance fall flat, therefore, because both are ultimately far less resistant than the novel imagines them to be. So Desiree's actions can be understood as structural, and she embraces modes of manageable difference, and she inhabits a subculture identified by fashionable commodities whose nature and acquisition she spends a lot of time describing. And in abandoning her youthful style, the novella endorses this a progress narrative of socialization, where Desiree grows up on the one hand, she rejects queer temporality in favor of bourgeois normativity. So that's one reading of Desiree. But as with the Mexican emos, such a dismissal of Desiree's failed resistance is too easy. Even if the intimate publics that both Desiree and the emos inhabit are not actively resistant, they are survival strategies that, as Burnett reminds us, warrant close consideration. And these performances of hyper-stylized affect, in which both Desiree and the emos engage, express a complicated, a multifaceted transnational alienation, and the shared community of which projects a kind of utopian longing for something better. But what is that something else? And what do its border crossings mean? And Berlant suggests, or she argues, that the main utopia of the market-driven intimate public is normality, a condition of belonging. In Cruising Utopia, Jose Munoz ties that drive expressly to queer ideality, which he explains as the understanding of queerness as a way of being able to see into the future. You know, a queer aesthetic like that projected by Desiree, she is after all still queer, even if she is living this kind of domesticated, blissful life. So this queer aesthetic that she projects and the emos projects contains, in Munoz's words, it contains the blueprints and schemata of a forward-dawning future. So rather than dismissing Desiree and Mexican emos for their apolitical naivete, we might instead wonder about the nature of their alienation. Why do they feel these things that they feel? And what do they have in common? And why is it articulated through this queer emo aesthetic? So both Desiree and the Mexican emos can be understood in Berlant's and Munoz's terms as expressing a deep dissatisfaction with the present and a longing for a future whose outlines and whose motivations remain relatively unclear, perhaps because their actions are reactive and structural. By contrast, British singer Stephen Morrissey's US Latino fans, while not entirely agentic themselves, are possessed of a certain amount of self-awareness that helps make some transnational sense of Desiree and the Mexican emos. And to set this part of the discussion up, I want to play a little segment from the Telemundo newscast about Morrissey's Latino fans, featuring, again, one of our guest speakers, José Maldonado. Again, it's in Spanish, but it opens with the newscaster saying that Morrissey's going to play some concerts in LA, and they sent this reporter to find out why Latinos love him so much. And they talked to Jose, who says Morrissey's very emotional. And then there's some background info on Morrissey, and they talk to some fans, and then they talk to Morrissey himself.
Y ahora nos trasladamos a Los Ángeles, California, donde un exitoso cantante conocido como Morrissey se está presentando en una serie de conciertos, y la mayoría de su público, que usted no lo crea, son hispanos. Fernando Mejía nos explica por qué Morrissey es adorado por esta comunidad. José Maldonado ha dedicado 15 años de su vida a la música de un solo cantante. José y su grupo, Street and Republicans, le han rendido tributo a Morrissey y los Smiths por una sola y sencilla razón.
Sus canciones son muy tan emocionales, como los latinos somos emocionales. Hay una canción para cada estación de la vida de cualquier persona. Las canciones de Morrissey.
Stephen Patrick Morrissey nació en Manchester, Inglaterra, en 1959. Sus fanáticos lo conocen solo por su apellido. Después de una corta carrera con el grupo de Smith, Morrissey se lanzó con mucho éxito como solista. ¿Quién se iba a imaginar que sus más fervientes admiradores estarían aquí en Los Ángeles y no necesariamente entre los anglosajones? Sus admiradores más fieles son los latinos como la familia Robles, y hasta su gato le pusieron el nombre de Moss, como le dicen cariñosamente al cantante.
It's totally cute.
Es música algo que los transporta al pasado y los acerca a su comunidad.
Para mí, me hace acordar a veces de Rafael. Saber que se tengo un hermano y se viste bien elegante.
Pues yo crecí en el monte, en una área del monte, y tenía muchos amigos que eran pandilleros.
Ricardo Chávez es otro seguidor de Morrissey. Él nos dijo que por la forma de vestirse lo confunden de pandillero, algo que hubiera sido posible, pero que Morrissey y su música se encargaron de cambiarle por completo su vida.
Lo que hizo Morrissey para mí, su música, pues en lugar de hablar con sus amigos, me quedé en mi casa escuchando su música, y pues la verdad me tocó el corazón.
Negando pocas veces visto, Morrissey estará presentándose por 2 semanas consecutivas aquí en el Hollywood Palladium. Él sabe de la fidelidad de los latinos. En su concierto del lunes pasado salió a cantar vestido con una camiseta, nada menos y nada más, de las Chivas Rayadas de Guadalajara. El artista, que es conocido por no conceder muchas entrevistas, habló con la cadena Telemundo sobre la relación de su música con los latinos.
Sure. I think the Latinos are full of emotion always, and whether it's tears or laughter, they're ready to explode, and they want to share their emotions, and they want to give.
2004 sacó una canción titulada First in the Gang to Die, que habla sobre la vida de un pandillero latino. Y hace poco abrió un concierto para el grupo mexicano Jaguares.
So many people make music which tell you nothing about themselves. It's very regimented. And I think it's important to be as open as possible. Give the heart. All of this is temporary.
Su música ha traspasado generaciones y los latinos parecen que le serán fieles por siempre.
Ella nomás tiene 8 años, pero le encanta su música. Le fascina.
Los tributos al cantante siguen surgiendo. Sus miembros fans dicen que, como dice la letra de una de sus canciones, morir a tu lado es una maravillosa forma de morir. Eso es lo que sus fanáticos piensan de él. En Los Ángeles, Fernando Mejía, Telemundo.
So, I don't know if you didn't speak Spanish, you probably didn't catch that where Telemundo kind of pats themselves on the back as a singer who's known for not giving many interviews agreed to talk to us. So they're very proud of themselves. And that, Morrissey gets asked this question a lot, like, why do so many Latinos love you? And he's often very glib and very flippant in his responses. So this was actually, even though it was a little, think what you will about what he said, it was sort of one of his more serious moments. And the Sweet and Tender Hooligans make a cameo in this clip that we just watched, but they're an institution in their own right, as many of you already know. And on May 22nd, 2009, the Sweet and Tender Hooligans played a show. They play a lot of shows, but I went to this one. They played a show in honor of Morrissey's 50th birthday at the House of Blues in Hollywood, California. I actually went with Miguel. And this was, again, Morrissey's 50th birthday party. And the show and the crowd that it drew attest to Morrissey's quizzical popularity among Southern California Latinos, and it demonstrates the extent to which a large portion of this community, LA-based Latinos, has embraced a recognizably emo sensibility. And that claim opens up a world of debate that I do think of Morrissey as emo. So the Smiths emerged in a post-punk era, and their music, like that of Fugazi and Jawbreaker, and Morrissey's solo work, waxed emotionally eloquent and elliptically political in ways that, for me, justify calling them emo. So the Hooligans are an LA-based Morrissey Smiths tribute band fronted by José Maldonado, a Mexican-American whose resemblance to Morrissey is so striking that Morrissey himself, upon meeting Maldonado, remarked that he felt as if he were, quote, looking in a mirror. In interviews, Morrissey treats the questions of his Latino fans both seriously and facetiously, telling one British interviewer, quote, "I really like Mexican people. I find them so terribly nice, and they have fantastic hair and fantastic skin and usually really good teeth. Great combination." As a direct quote. While adopting a more contemplative stance with Telemundo, with Fernando Mejia, who we saw, with Telemundo, a Puerto Rican-based Spanish-language television station with a global market share, so clearly he was taking Telemundo more seriously than this British newspaper. José Maldonado, the Hooligans' lead singer, also repeatedly fields questions from interviewers wondering where Morrissey's appeal to his Latino fans lies, and he'll do the same thing for us this afternoon. Like Morrissey, Maldonado grants that Mexicans and Latinos respond to Morrissey's sentimentality, and that's what we saw in the clip. But Maldonado sees a parallel political context in which Morrissey's popularity with Chicanos and US Latinos can be situated. Transcendent Passions is a shot of Jose in the film My Life with Morrissey. Transcendent passion is one thing, but then there's the loneliness and isolation feelings, I'm quoting, that we as Latinos growing up in Southern California can kind of identify with, Maldonado told one interviewer. So beyond the sentiment then, there are real material reasons for Morrissey's popularity. So US Latino emos in this context can be understood as mitigating their sense of disbelonging with an emo aesthetic that mitigates what Berlant calls many kinds of structural and historical antagonism. So emo, in other words, is a way for US Latinos to sidestep the emotional pain caused by racism and structural inequality in the United States. In this geopolitical context, Here's another hyper-academic moment. The intimate public of emo creates what Svetlana Boym calls diasporic intimacy, which she defines as a survivalist aesthetics of estrangement and longing. Berlant also sees the intimate public as a survival strategy, but for Boym, survival is explicitly tied to the pain of exile. And Boym acknowledges that exile is a tired old metaphor for the human condition, and she makes clear that her arguments about actual exile, which eludes the writer's skill. It's something you can't, it's a story that you can't tell. Exile has no poetics. It's an art of survival, she calls it. It's a quote, art of survival. So emo, as practiced by US Latinos, thus must be understood as such, as the aesthetic manifestation of diasporic intimacy. So US Latinos are, as Jose said on the slide that we were just looking at, outsiders in a place that really isn't for them. All feel a measure of isolation from a country dominated, especially right now in the early 21st century, by an Anglo majority and engulfed in immigration debates mired in nativist rhetoric. Morrissey fandom, we can think of Morrissey fandom as a space where US Latinos can experience a sense of connection and belonging predicated on a performance of hyper emotion like that expressed in Morrissey's music. Morrissey's coyness regarding his own sexuality, he's famously tight-lipped about that, as I'm sure many of you know, and his flirtations with queer culture resonate with the androgynous gender-bending behavior of Mexican and US Latino emos. Following Boym's assertion that exiles always imagine themselves as performing, we can read emo gender play elusively, so as alluding to these things as part of a hyper-stylized emotional performance that makes diasporic angst visible through the body. So each instance considered here, the Mexican emos, Desiree's body consciousness, and Morrissey's Latino fans, each of them represent an attempt to connect with others through the shared pain of loss, while also rejecting cultural nostalgia. This transnational emo community turns its eyes not towards the past, but towards an unscripted future full of undefined hope. Such utopian longing is, according to Jose Munoz, the provenance of an unabashedly queer aesthetic. So it is what makes queerness queer, according to Jose Munoz, this looking towards the future. It grounds this queer aesthetic that imagines a future predicated on the collective betterment of all. And it's this future that we can imagine queer, Latino, and Mexican emo style alluding to on both sides of the border. Thanks very much. It's my pleasure to turn things over now to one of my favorite emos, Nikki Darling.
Oh goodness.
Okay. Even emos who are identified as emos don't necessarily identify as such.
So, are you going to ask some questions, or am I just going to rap?
I was hoping you were just going to rap.
Sure.
I know from experience that that's more interesting.
Oh, okay, cool. I mean, I guess I can just. I thought you were going to ask me questions, but I will rap. I guess I can speak personally on my experience with like emo culture growing up in Los Angeles. Is that something that? Okay.
Yeah. Do
Okay.
you want me to find some stuff for you to read?
No. Oh, do you want me to read?
That you can.
Oh,
yeah,
I will-
clearly we're all totally on the ball here today.
Okay, I will totally read. Had I known it, okay, yeah. This is from, I will read a section of my book that I think probably is in line. Are there any sections in the book that you particularly think are in line with the discussion today, or
I can start by asking you a question.
Yeah.
And I'll find.
Yeah, we
I'll
can
find
rap.
some of my favorite parts.
Yeah, we can rap. We can totally.
All right. So
I mean,
I
I'm
guess-
ready to go.
Sorry. I guess we can start by just having you talk about your own
Personal experience.
your own experiences with music, like the significance of the relationship between music and your identity, kind of your developing identity as a Chicana in the 90s.
Absolutely.
The 90s, the sort of post-Smiths, post-punk period, as when kind of Latino emo community starts solidifying, and I'll find.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. So I was born in 1980, which makes me 32. I'll be 33 next week, and which puts me in 8th grade in 1993, I believe, and that is the year I sort of came into my own with music being a thing that was something I chose and not something that was just playing in my household. However, I did grow up in a house with a lot of music, which I think anyone that's interested in music has. That's a common theme. Some people just discovered on their own and they grew up in a house of like silence. But there was a lot of music in my home growing up, and because of that, I gravitated towards friends that also listened to music because it was a common language that I shared with other people. And one of the things about music, I'm going to talk about my experience as like a Latino with music in a second, but just music in general. One of the things I think that's so powerful about it is that it really can. It is one of the most accessible art form. It is, I believe, the most accessible of all the art forms because. You don't have to walk into the Whitney to experience music. I mean, as well, you can just drive down the street and see beautiful architecture. So I actually think that architecture is another wonderful example of public art. But it belongs to people. But music. Oh, look at that! Someone calling about. Oh, it's Sally Mae. Call you later. Call you later, Sally Mae. So, you can be in the grocery store and, you can hear Britney Spears, and someone in Mexico can be at the gas station and they can hear Britney Spears, and you're having that beautiful moment. And that is a beautiful moment when you hear Britney Spears in the grocery store. Because usually they only play drag. But, anyway, so my experience growing up was that as I was telling Miguel when we first walked in, is I was raised by a single mother who is Mexican American, and I look like this, and my name is Nikki Darling. And so I grew up passing, quote unquote passing, but as a child, like, your experiences are very much filtered through your parents, because your parents are, the access you have to the world as a child is through the access that your parents have. And so my access was very limited, yet at the same time, I sort of was treated as an entitled person. Even as a young child, I could see the difference in how I was treated and how my little brown friends were treated. And that because it's like I tend to think of it as like calcium buildup, like a cavity, like. It's these little things, little glances, little ways that like certain people talk to you that they don't talk to other people, which is very favorable. And for instance, someone thought that I actually had the real life experience of my mother coming to pick me up in 2nd grade and having my teacher say, "Oh, your nanny's here," and I was like, "Oh, that's my mommy." And so it's like over time, it's like there's a cavity. So I guess it's just like a very roundabout way of saying I grew up feeling othered. Othered within a system in which I was expected to feel like or sort of carry this sort of like not othered confidence. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, this isn't about like my personal identity politics. Well, it is, but not so much. It's about Morrissey. So my best little friend in elementary school, Marissa López and I were obsessed with the Smiths and Morrissey and Shakira, who like in '94 was still only rocking Espanol, and a lot of this sort of like rockabilly movement. I was psychobilly, so I'd go like the Hootenanny and like Whittier, hung out in. I'm from the SGV, so that's San Gabriel Valley. So there's a very large, like I hung out in like El Monte and La Puente and Montebello and like all these places, Garvey, and I think now I'm babbling. Emo. I never personally identified as emo. I never described myself as emo, but I did describe myself as psychobilly, rockabilly, or punk. Like when I was looking for sort of like, when one had to attribute a label, those I guess were the labels I would attribute to myself. But in those fringe communities are lots of emo kids, kids that are in the Smiths and Morrissey and Bauhaus and Susie Sue and all of this stuff. And that culture is definitely relevant and prominent in my early. You found something for me to read.
I have 3 things.
Okay. So I think I'm just going to read because I'm a writer and not a riffer. All right, let's see. Where do you want me to start, lovely Marissa? Oh, it's a good place. I wrote it. All right. So this conversation is taking place between two characters. The main character, Nikki. Oh, and I have to correct you really quickly. It's not a memoir. It's a fictionalized memoir.
Oh, yes. A memoir of a fictional character.
Yeah, it's a memoir of a fictional character who is actually me. And I would like to actually point to Miguel here, who is probably the first person since I've described my book who described what I was doing accurately. What did you say? You said I was
creating your own mythology.
Creating my own mythology. That's exactly what I'm doing, because this goes into my semantics, but as a brown person or passing person, or POC, we all know what that means. I think that we need to create egotistical myths, and I think that we need to be like Madonna and not give a fuck. I think we just need to be like, hey, we're here, we're queer, we're brown, we're proud, and I don't need to have a reason to hate you. I just do. Anyway, so we need white people. My dad is white. I love my dad. Okay. He's a swell guy. He's in Vietnam. All right. So these two characters, yeah. The Nikki character and the other character, Dan, right? Yeah. Are in the car and they're coming home from a party. Yeah, they were at a party, and no. She just had an emotional breakdown because the boy that she likes doesn't like her, so he's taking her to get ice cream at Thrifty's. Okay. Do you feel Mexican? This is Dan. Oh no. Oh, this is me. Or the character of me. Do you feel Mexican? He shakes his head and laughs. You're so weird. What? You don't? No. Am I speaking too close? Okay. No. Well, you shouldn't. You aren't. I mean, not like me and Cello. You're, American. You're American. You and Jess are American. Jess is Jewish, and other stuff. My kids will be like you. I live in America, but America doesn't want me. Look, you live in Pasadena. I live in El Monte. It's not the same. You were born here. Yeah, my brother was born in Jalisco. I'm an immigrant. Doesn't matter if I'm not actually. Doesn't matter what you really are. You know that. It's how people treat you. What difference does it make if I was born here if my father gets talked down to me like a piece of shit? That's my father. You're weirdly wise. Duh. Your mom, though, is beautiful. That's it. She managed that. Now she's got Dr. Green to pay her bills. Good for her. And so what? You're supposed to be like Peter Pan now or whatever? She comes home. She leaves money. I'm not mad. Uh-huh. Dan turns the corner with one hand and reaches into the back seat with his other and grabs his backpack. He unzips it and pulls out a tape. My War, he says, holding up the black flag cassette. I nod and smile. Give a little, that's great wave. He's like me. Mike? Yeah, he's American. He surfs. I know, I've seen him. He goes out to Point Dune. He's good. He surfs alone, though. Is that supposed to be some sort of weird metaphor? Dan laughs and shakes his head. You're a real character, kiddo. I'm 2 months older than you, dude. His mother is blonde. His mother's dead. I know that, too. They make him sleep in the garage. You can't start this shit. Oh, do you want me to stop there or do you want me to keep
No, you just read until you feel like you're done and I can ask you questions.
Okay.
Or I bookmark some others.
Okay. I'll read. Okay, yeah. I'll read in. Okay, yeah. So you can get a sort of. This is good because it's a visual sort of where I grew up. It's about to get descriptive. You should read what Ian Carson wrote about adjectives in an autobiography of Red. It is incredibly. Okay, you can't start this shit. God, it's like I'm watching your bad male habits in their infancy. Don't spend the next 20 years chasing dudes you can't have. How come you've never talked like this before? Like what? I don't know, like a grown-up or whatever. Nikki, I'm not an idiot. Then why do you act like a Neanderthal? Fuck you, man. Whatever. And what makes you so mature? You're about as mature as a toddler. Who gives a shit? You high yet? I don't know, I feel calmer. Yeah, you're high. He drives down Main toward the Thrifty off Atlantic. I watch an old Asian couple push their cart filled with long beans and wrapped fish from the market around the corner. They were hunched over, her wearing a floppy straw hat and him a Dodgers baseball cap and blue stay-pressed pants. A kid on a skateboard swerves around them and yells something in Chinese. It sounds like, "Get out of the way." His head has been shaved to a prison stubble, except for a loose, shiny black ponytail that rests on top and two long chunks that hang from his temples and frame the sides of his face. The old couple stops. He jumps off his skateboard and wipes his face with his oversized white t-shirt. Underneath, his stomach muscles are rippled and tattooed. A pager's clipped his khaki dickies. Asian bangers, man, are so hard. I bet he has a gat, whispers Dan, transfixed. I roll my eyes. We sit at the stoplight and watch him. He's waiting with us so he can cross. I bet he has a Honda. How am I like your mom? A rice rocket? Hell yeah, I love those things. Fuck yeah. How am I like your mom? You keep thinking some dude is gonna solve all your problems. Her I get. You I don't get. You're 16, man. Have a little confidence. You're a cute girl. And guess thanks. Want to hear something funny? I was talking to, oh, okay, I'll stop there. Okay. Alright, so, you want me to read here?
I do, but maybe before you
Yeah,
do,
yeah,
one question that,
Be the piper.
My students, this fictional memoir is not yet published, but as students in the seminar that I'm teaching this quarter, we read this and we talked about it at length together, and then we had the opportunity to talk to Nikki about it too. And one question that we could explore here
Whatever you want.
is why this character, Dan, is the character that the Nikki character appears to feel so close to, or the closest to.
Yes. In the book, Dan is a freshman carpool, and he gets his permit before the main character. So they carpool, and this is their junior year. So they have spent the past like 5 months not carpooling, and this is kind of a come together moment where they discuss like why I haven't seen you all semester, and that doesn't answer your question, but that's who he is. He's punk. He's very punk. He's into the plugs, now his bag, and nausea, and all of those things, and Op Ivy and whatever. And he's sort of like a very influential person in Nikki's life, because he is possessed of this sort of musical knowledge that is attractive to her. He seems to know everything. You know, those people in high school that knew all the bands before you knew them, and you were embarrassed to be like, I don't know who that is. And then you're like 30 and you're like, I was fucking 15. Of course I didn't know who the butt plugs were, you know. Now I'm like, I don't know about Tangerine Dream. Tell me about them. But
Tangerine Dream?
Never be ashamed. Tangerine?
I know.
Anyway. So he's like one of those magic people that just seems to know everything, and he wears really cool clothes, and he smells bad, and he's extremely handsome. But I know why you ask. The reason she feels most comfortable around him is because he is Mexican, but he is full Mexican, but he is meaning both of his parents are Mexican, but he is possessed. But he's also like an Angelino through and through, and he's possessed in this sort of knowledge of feeling othered. And because they're forced into a carpool together, well, they weren't forced in, they came into a carpool together as strangers. They've built this friendship around music and being sad, you know, emo. Like, you know, when you're in high school and you're sad, you find your sad people, you know, and
They're kind of the same thing.
They're the same thing.
In high school.
they're sad. They're sad and they're friends and they carpool and they like the same music, and he's attractive, and he also offers her sort of like social agency because he's cool. So, you know, it's the beginning of my little narrative's long road to social climbing. So, also, that was sort of a joke, but sort of not a joke. One of the things about this character, and there's going to be a sequel to this book, is sort of when you do feel othered, it's kind of like a daily exercise of trying to find where you do fit, sort of, you know. And I'm sure many of us in that room have that experience, or we wouldn't be at this panel because, you know, we're with our people, yo.
Well, some of what you were saying actually connects to the other part that I thought you could read in this.
Sure.
This is, no, I do
the
love this part.
The birthday or the party?
The party, but the part where you go to the record store with
my longtime friend.
With
Sarah.
Poobahs. With Sarah. And because the character is going to look for the Weirdos album. Of course, Alex Baggs' boyfriend is the drummer.
Yeah.
Put that out there and see what connections you can make.
Yeah. Okay, so this is section number 8. So my character grew up in Pasadena, and within her group of friends who are mostly full Latino punk and rockabilly kids from sort of the south part of the San Gabriel Valley, which I mentioned is like largely Latino and Asian. It's like Montebello area, San Gabriel. She is like their like white friend, and the character Nikki, and they like kind of keep her around because they know that she like has an in sort of. She's anyway. She goes to a record store with one of her childhood friends who is a neighbor who lives in the neighborhood that she grew up in. That's what neighbor means. And I had a croissant, like a really big coffee. And they're pulling away from one another because their friendship is changing because as the main character gets older, she finds that she doesn't belong anymore in ways that she used to feel like she belonged, and that like as her identity changes and she becomes more aware of the differences between the two of them, they're pulling apart. So this is a scene where they are trying to hang out and still hold on to that old friendship, but it's obvious that things are changing. Okay. Main character is awakening to her radical politicalism. All right. Huba's, the old record store run by a couple of burnt-out, long, white-haired hippies with yellow mustaches from years of nicotine and weed smoke, sits inside an old dusty bungalow in Pasadena and houses one of the finest collections in all of Los Angeles County, half of it stapled to the old house walls. Every inch covered with masterworks from Jim Morrison to David Gilmour to The Police, Black Flag, Harry Belafonte, and Keely Shea Smith. The ceiling is covered as well, a virtual time capsule of the last 30 years of hep cats and rockers, autographed headshots looking down on you like the smiling heads of the gods. And to us, maybe. Hey, Grand Poobah, Real Honey, Love Dolly P. Never close your doors, mate. Keith Richards. Sarah's currently got half the store under her arm. I flipped through the punk section looking for a Weirdos album Cello told me about. I pretended like I knew who they were, and now I'm under self-imposed pressure to catch up on my lie before I see her next. I can't find it, and Sarah walks up to the old wooden register. The front countertop piled high with rock books, moldy LA Weeklies, chattering wind-up teeth, and a stapled plastic chicken that hangs from the front. She opens her mouth in order to announce her presence at the register, one foot on the small stool in place so that customers can step up and hand their purchases to one of the old hippies who sit hidden somewhere behind the piles of junk. Do you have the Weirdos? I asked, shoving over the stack before Sarah can speak. Hey, I was next, she said, shoving me out of the way, dog and butterfly by heart slipping from her arm. She kneels down to readjust her pile. We're the only ones in here, jerk, I tell her. A white head, an old snowy peak, emerges from behind the pile. Sold one last week. Want me to order it? No, it's okay. I'll go to the tower. What about Team Dresch? Who? Asks Sarah, standing. It's queercore, I say. We sure do. He emerges from the side of the register like the Wizard of Oz, shorter and more human than one would expect. I follow to the youth section, and he pulls it out from behind the T place card. We got personal best. Want it? Yes, please, I say, nodding. He walks back to the register and climbs the little steps back to his stool. He punches it in, and I can hear him place it in a plastic bag. Sarah stands, trying to keep all her records in her grasp, mouth open like I've just fucked a horse in front of her. Rude much? She says, still glaring at me. That'll be $8, he says. I hand the money over and he hands the bag down. Thanks. Yep, he answers unenthusiastically. Sarah hands her records over next, her head still twisted in my direction, in disgust. Close it, I say, you'll catch the airborne herps. Oh, this is one of my favorites, says the disembodied voice of old register hippie. American Beauty was the album that defined the dead. I listened to this on my drive from New York to LA in '71. Just a record player plugged into the generator in the back seat, bumping along as we went. The old man fades into the background, and I can hear Sarah saying some boring business back as she hands more of the records over. I pull the Dresch album from the bag and look at Donna Dresch's face. It feels cool, real good and cool. Whatever you like.
Well, why those albums for Sarah? Like, what's the difference between?
Yeah. I mean, that's why I wrote the scene. Yeah. So it's like the very beginning of the Nikki characters. Like I said, sort of like political awakening and sort of like coming to this realization that like the choices you make every day and what you listen to, what you wear, and what you say have outward signifiers. Like she's starting to realize that like what you wear means something and what you listen to means something. And it's sort of like in queer culture in the 70s, like, you know, gay men put like the handkerchief in the left pocket or the back pocket, and it's a coded language of saying I identify with this or I identify with that. And this character is sort of like making a visual and audible statement about who she is becoming and who she wants to be. And this other character is sort of like Sarah, the Sarah character that she grew up with, jumping on trampolines and going to the Ren Fair and sort of like doing crafty crafts. And that's the thing, the character's mother is Mexican, but she is a caterer and an interior decorator in Beverly Hills, so they sort of have this foot in this like cultured door. And the character's mother is a hippie and an artist, so she's herself also a different sort of Latino because she has like Northern California experience, and so she's Mexican, but she's not even the right kind of Mexican. You know, she's like this weird hippie lady Mexican daughter person, and she's gravitating toward this new group of kids who feel more in line with her experiences. You know, she doesn't want to listen to Heart, although the character does go to college and get very, very into Nancy Wilson. But, you know, she doesn't want to listen to Heart. She doesn't want to listen to, like, Led Zepp. She wants to, like, really, like, she wants to listen to Alice Bag. She wants to watch, like, The Decline of Western Civilization. She wants to know, like, were there people like me before me? And in this, like, culture, even though all these, and again with Dan, like, even though he's full Mexican, he's othered in the sense that he is a Mexican kid in LA who listens to punk rock, who isn't an immigrant, who isn't dumb, but who isn't welcomed into the culture, who on the one hand exists and sounds like he's from the valley, and but on the other hand is treated by the outside world, meaning not his friend, like when he goes to the video store, he goes to buy a burger or whatever, like, you know, he's treated like he's Mexican, you know, and he is, but the culture hasn't caught up with his internalized identity yet. And so that's sort of what I also wanted the book to be about, just sort of the, like, the Mexican American community in Los Angeles is so much more varied than I think it's given credit for. Like, it's so, you know, and it overlaps and interweaves. Like, I remember my first boyfriend was really poor and ghetto and lived in Montebello, and we used to smoke weed on his porch with his sister who was pregnant and her 2-year-old baby, and she was like 17. But their uncle was like a professor here and like a filmmaker, and so it's like it's like there's this idea that like it's like poor people, rich people, but it's like the community, and that's the other thing I really loved about like the Mexican American community in my high school, especially when I joined Mecha, was that like there is, you know, like I got really involved in like El Sereno wanting to autonomize itself, and like and just the group, the convergence. You're gonna have to like at some point do it.
Oh,
No, because I do have
I'll
just
a
keep talking. I'll just keep talking.
Because Dan then becomes a kind of fetishized object between these two girls at the end of that scene.
Yeah.
So you leave the record store, and then you're having lunch, and then Sarah starts asking. Sorry, I said you. Sarah starts asking
No, you can
Nikki.
just, it's easier. Just say
about Dan, right?
Yeah.
So maybe you could talk a little bit about that. Like, it's clear that there's differences between these two characters, but why is Dan this like shared object of affection?
Well, because I think like for Sarah, who in the book it's noted that she has she's sexually active. She's sexually active, and she herself is also othered, but she's becoming othered in another way. She's going to kind of join this sort of like hippie set of kids and just, you know, get into like marijuana and having sex and going to rock concerts and still going to the Ren Fair and like, you know, whatever. And this like other character, Nikki, is like going off into this punk rock Latino sort of way. And the thing with Dan is I think like even though this character is sexually active, she's never had a boyfriend. And the Sarah character. And the Nikki character, for all intents and purposes, has been the single biggest romantic relationship of her life. And when I say romantic, I don't mean that they're queer or that they have coitus. They don't. But they're, you know, when you're a young teenage girl, you're in love with your friends. You know, they're love relationships. And in a relationship, and this book is sort of, it's about many things, but one of the things it's about is about this love relationship changing and falling apart. And I mean, I think that's beyond race. I mean, that's just like part of growing up, is when you fall out of love with the people you were in love with before. And so I think that Sarah's threatened by Dan. You know, she feels threatened by this person that seems to be taking up all this time in the other character's life. But the twist in the book is that she actually doesn't like Dan. The Sarah character misunderstands the friendship. She thinks that it has to be based on something sexual because that's how she interacts with boys. But for the Nikki character, it's based on this feeling of not belonging. And that she actually is in love with Mike, who is a gay surfer who is half white and half Mexican like her, and he is the only true reflection, aside from being a man, that she has in her community. Someone who is except that he has a white mother and a Mexican father, and she has a Mexican mother and a white father, but they are like mirror images of one another's like personal experiences, except that they don't share the same sexual identity.
When you talk about being in love with your friends, and maybe we can move towards a close of our conversation by having you read this section about the party, which really, I mean, it's so many things, but it's also, it feels like a love letter to the children of LA.
Oh yeah, that's why you're a professor. You're so sweet.
Yes, I just made that up.
No, and that's because
I did.
But that's what it is. That's so great. Okay, so this is Cello, who is and that's the other ironic thing, is that this the Sarah character is feeling very threatened by Dan, but really the person that she's falling out of love with in favor for this new person is this character Cello, who is also embodying a new sort of romantic friend-like obsession from the Nikki. The Nikki character is very enamored with this Cello character. His real name is Angela. Okay. Cello and I walk into the house, and I can tell things are about to get real cinema tonight. It's a night when the city you live in becomes abundantly clear. There is a giant mid-century modern glass wall that hangs over a cliff of the South Pasadena Hills and stares straight over Highland Park, Montecito Heights, Lincoln Heights, and into downtown. We all sort of pause and bump into each other's heels when we first walk through the giant wooden 1940s carved oak door. A giant bull head resembling Picasso's bull masks is carved into the wood, and the huge Gothic bronze door handle is like pushing into a prefab castle, and we stare briefly, dumbfounded. Lights, buildings, emerald erect, emerald contained. Look at it. No wonder we're all fucked up and broken. No wonder we're all high and lazy. No wonder we're all bored and trying to grab onto apathy with every ounce of energy we can muster, every fiber of our souls. No wonder we drink music like water. No wonder we watch movies like food. We are trapped like flies in the bell jar. We are specimen in God's big joke. A super city of non-city, a city of death and reinvention, glittering arrows of black, pulsating like rockets through the night, ready to pierce the deepest part of our being. Fuck, we're LA kids. We are the kids of LA. They write books about us. They make after-school specials about us, and none of it is the real us. None of it really captures who we are. But we eat it, digest it, and let it redefine us until we no longer know what is real and what is fake, and how cliched is that. We are the sticky center of the cliche. We jump off cliffs, robo-trip, slice our wrists, star in TV specials about the 60s. We OD in gutters and slam doors while peeling out of driveways in new and old cars, 16 and seething. We fall into swimming pools and float to the bottom. We stand on dark street corners waiting to kill our own. We drive by in cars ready to annihilate our faith in ourselves, ready to destroy that which is most sacred. We bleed, we walk down sidewalks, daring the world to photograph us, daring the goddamn place to care. We party, we converge, we weep, we grow weary. The smog though, the smog when the sun sets is a sight to be seen. Riding home on the 134 at night, coyotes of Griffith Park howling. Something so tainted, something so bad for you, making everything seem beautiful, magical, a fantasy to behold, a fantasy to be beholden. We live here. We build this shit up and let it break us down. We dissolve into myth. We let authors steal our stories and toss them high into the hills where we spread like wildfire. The smoke of our lives hovers over everything until we have crept into every home, every school, every office, every television set, and reminded you that this is a city of slash and burn. This is a city ablaze. Mike yanks on my arm and pulls me toward him. Cello is in the bright aquamarine pool, her red hair fanning around her as she pushes toward the bottom. The small twinkle lights strung through oak trees cover everything in a romantic fairy tale hue of steam and spiraling pools of iridescence. The fluorescent soft yellow pool light creates black shadows of our bodies, moving and talking, laughing and drinking, eating and smoking. We're the oldest kids you know. We're all about 100 years old. Cello is all prehistoric, and then Dan grabs my arm, and Mike yanks my arm, and the entire place stops, and we rise like zombies to the boomtown. Too much fighting on the dance floor. Wet, dripping, we look like thriller extras. Skank bitches, shouts Jessica, and someone pushes her into the pool. A rainbow roll flies off a tray and falls over the side of the cliff. Wasabi is like all over the place. Mike and Dan cannonball. They kick, steam rising around them when they shoot back up, wet serpents crawling onto land. We're so cinema. We're so like, we own this. We're so like, don't even try. This is ours. The lights blossom like midnight flowers. Morning glories hang like sleeping bats. The streets are windy and we wobble.
I don't think there's anything else.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
I feel self-conscious talking after.
Oh.
Really, it's beautiful, beautiful prose.
No.
So let's.
I just need to open my mouth and talk for real then, and you'll feel fine.
Let's move. We'll have more time for that later. Let's move from beautiful prose to beautiful music, and with that, I'll segue to Miguel and Jose.
Got a little. Well, thanks everybody for coming. My name is Miguel Unzueta. I'm an associate professor of management over at the business school. That said, I teach in the business school, but I don't think of myself as being evil. At least I don't think I'm evil. I'll leave that to you to decide, I suppose. We're here today not to hear about me, but rather to speak to our distinguished guest here, who is José Maldonado, who is a lifeguard, a marathoner, and more importantly, for the purposes of this conference, he is the front man of Sweet and Tender Hooligans, LA's tribute to the Smiths and the Morrissey. You guys have been around for, is it 21?
Yeah, 21 years this October.
21 years now, okay. So we are, of course, going to get into questions regarding Morrissey's appeal to Latino youth, Chicanos, to Mexican Americans. But before we do all that kind of stuff, which I'm sure you get questions of that all the time, I want to first just talk a little bit about you. And so I'm just curious if you can just tell us a little bit about yourself. Where'd you grow up? Yeah, let's just start there.
Sure. I grew up in the 70s in Burbank, California. So I'm old enough to be all of your dads, I guess. So my growing up experience, my growing up Latino experience, is going to be wildly different from the way most of you guys did, but not too different. At the time, I was one of only a few Latinos growing up. So nowadays, if you were to go back to my school, it would be about 50% to 75% Latino, you know. So my experience growing up around school, it's like I wasn't Anglo enough, but at home, my family, with my aunts and uncles and cousins, when we'd visit in Mexico, I wasn't Mexican enough. So I remember, in fact, I remember in junior high and high school when people would say why, when people would ask questions like, why is your name Jose? And I would explain, oh, well, I'm Mexican. And when I talk to Jewish friends of mine, they get that growing up a lot. It's funny, you don't look Jewish. And I got the funny, you don't look Mexican. And I never quite understood what does this look Mexican mean, you know. Spanish was my first language. I went to kindergarten not speaking a word of English. And I went right into, just right into that petri dish. And learned English right away. It's one thing that you don't quite realize, that at 5 years old, you are built to learn every language like that the world has to offer. So I cherish that experience definitely, because with my parents, even though we grew up in Burbank, some of their friends that grew up in more heavily Latino populated areas like Norwalk or El Monte, the attitude back then was, hey, none of that Spanish around here, all right? You gotta go out and assimilate. You gotta speak English, otherwise they're gonna treat you differently, or give you menial jobs or whatever. That wasn't the case growing up with my parents. In fact, my dad, to this day, it's like, hey, talk to me in Spanish. Háblame en español. Háblame en cristiano. We would say. So I didn't get that. It's weird. I grew up in, if anywhere I should have assimilated, it should have been in Burbank, California in 1977. If anywhere I could have gotten away with not assimilating, it would have been Norwalk in 1977. And yet, that was the...
it worked out.
Yeah.
It worked out differently.
Definitely.
So I'm assuming you're first generation here in the States. Your parents are, where are they from?
Both my parents born and raised in Chihuahua.
Okay.
And
what part of Chihuahua?
the Mero Chihuahua, the city of Chihuahua.
Okay.
Mero Chihuahua. The funny thing that a lot of people may not know, but there was a time in California. Where the attitude was not, all right, you Mexicans, geez, go back to Mexico. In fact, there was a time it was like, hey, Mexicans, Chinese, everybody, come on over. We got jobs, we got school. That's what it was like in the 60s, because my family's coming to America story is that in 1969, 1968, 1969, all of the aerospace workers, all of the machinists and whatnot, they were off getting killed in Vietnam. So they went to the trade schools in Mexico and recruited the best students, the top students, to see if they wanted to come out and work in the aerospace industry here in Southern California, which was booming at the time. So my dad's coming to America story is very accidental. It's very much, well, we got places here in Southgate, there's this place here called Burbank. You got any choice? And my dad just goes, Burbank's fine. And that's just where I happened to grow up, just complete by accident.
How many siblings did you grow up with? And I'm slowly making our way towards what kind of music you guys are listening to. But I'm just curious. Only child? We got siblings? What are we talking about?
There's no such thing as an only child. There's no such thing as an only Mexican child. Not in the 60s and 70s. But
I was going to say, I grew up in the late 70s. I technically am an only child.
There you go.
But I think I'm the exception to the rule.
Yeah, I'm the oldest of 6 kids.
Okay.
Yeah, it was. It's the greatest gift my parents ever gave me was brothers and sisters. I'll tell you that. And if I could afford it, I'd have way more kids. Definitely.
So, what kind of music's in the air? So you're growing up in LA, it's the 70s, your parents are from Chihuahua. What are they listening to? What's playing? I mean, when you're a kid, as it was my experience, it was basically whatever my mom listened to. I grew up on the border, El Paso Juarez border. We cross over, we go buy records over in Juarez, and I would listen to what she was listening to. Curious, same thing with you? And what was sort of the initial stuff that was in the air?
Well, the one guy is at the forefront is Julio Iglesias. That's the one guy that's at the forefront. That's what my mom listened to. That's what she loved, and she loved that kind of a singer, and that he was.
Like the crooner style, yeah.
Absolutely. She loved that. She loved it. Yeah, all the crooners. And then when she came out to live here, it's no surprise she gravitated toward. She gravitated towards the Neil Diamond. Okay. Which is, I guess, Julio Iglesias, Neil Diamond, same kind of person, different languages, but But when it comes to picking the music that I wanted to listen to and that I love, I think that it's whatever you discover between the ages of 11 to 23, all right? Whatever you discover between the ages of 11 and 23, that's what you're gonna love for the rest of your life. I don't care who you are. And every single generation does this. Oh man, today's music sucks. It wasn't even, man, in the 60s, that was music. Okay, yeah, that's because that's when you were 11 to 23. And one thing I've learned over the years of being in a band and listening to other music is that no one decade, no one time holds the monopoly in good music or even sucky music. All right? It's whatever you liked between the ages of 11 and 23. And there's a reason why people in their 40s like Coldplay. Because it reminds them of a little something that they not only that, but I'm sure the members of Coldplay grew up listening to those same bands. You know, and I just put Coldplay out there out of thin air. It wasn't like an example or anything like that.
No offense to all the Coldplay fans,
Yeah.
which I'm sure there are plenty out there.
Viva la vida.
Yeah, exactly. So let's get a little more specific here. So when we're talking about that turning point, that you sort of picked out the era, age 11 to 23, can you just tell us a couple of the records that were the first records that kind of opened up your eyes to the power of music, the beauty of music? What were they?
The power of music in Los Angeles. You gotta give all the credit to K-Rock. You gotta give it to that radio station. They were the best. They were the best rock station on the planet. That for a kid growing up in the '80s, that was perfect. It was just fantastic. These bands from these exotic places that we'd never heard before. And when I was 10 years old, my friend and my school friend, his mom got a job in the sales department at this newer radio station called K-Rock. And we had no idea, well, what kind of music did they play? So we just turned it on that one time, and on that station was Devo. That was the very first band I ever got into, by the way. A lot of people don't know this. Favorite band ever. Okay, I mean, yeah, Morrissey, yes, absolutely. But the one band that really got me into music and got me the first record I bought with my own money was 1981's Freedom of Choice. So as time goes on and as the Smiths break and start getting played on K-Rock, that definitely was a turning point musically where nobody had ever sung quite like this. Nobody had ever sung lyrics like this before. That's what I gravitated.
And now we're talking about the Smiths.
Now we're talking about Morrissey. Now we're talking about the Smiths.
Yeah. And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe I've heard you say in the past that the first Smiths song you heard was "Cemetery Gates."
Yeah.
And so
You've done your research.
I did my work, man. I gotta say, did my homework on this. So I'm just curious. Can you do you remember that moment? Can you just tell us what did you hear? What was so special about this particular band, this particular song?
Well, that particular song had, of course, Morrissey's lyrics, and Morrissey's unique voice that I'd never heard of up to that point. And I was in a record store, and they were actually. There used to be these things called record stores, where you went in. Right. Oh, she talked about Pooh Bahs. Yeah, that's right. Fantastic record store. But no, they were playing the Queen is Dead album right there and I heard Cemetery Gates, and I stopped. I was on a lunch break. I stopped and I waited for the next song, and the next song after that was Big Mouth Strikes Again. And then the next song after that was The Boy with a Thorn in His Side. And then at that point, I just went right to the store and I said, all right, I want this record. And soon enough, after that, it was every other record after, and every magazine article, every interview. I had to know more about this Morrissey guy. It was fantastic.
So that leads me right. I was just going to ask you, and it might be hard for you to answer this, but can you give us your favorite Smiths record and then your favorite Morrissey solo record? I mean, I'm asking you to pick one from each. I mean, if it's an impossible
from a catalog of 300 plus songs, they're all my favorite. I know it's a boring answer. I know it's just bad, but they are all my favorite. There is a Morrissey or a Smith song. There's a Morrissey or Smith's lyric for just about any situation in anyone's life. You get to that one point where this one thing happens, and there's a lyric, and you find yourself saying, "I just might die with a smile on my face after all." for example.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So it's hard to say. It's hard to pick favorites. It really is. It changes every day.
Yeah, it is interesting. Like I think Morrissey does have this reputation of being. I mean, for folks that aren't familiar with the actual sort of range of songs and emotions, people kind of think of it as sort of sad music, sad bastard music being the technical term. Yet I always find that I sort of can gravitate to any of his songs regardless of emotion. I had plenty of sad bastard moments in my life where having a birthday, for example, in graduate school was not the most fun time in my life, and listening to Unhappy Birthday, that was just perfect. And as the eternal tears I shed throughout grad school. I'm saying too much about myself. Just going to press
really
on.
Ruined you.
Yeah, grad school did really do a number on me. But now I'm out and I'm here, so it's all good. All right, so let's switch to talking a little bit about your band. What kind of musical training do you have? I mean, obviously you're a singer and you are a guitar player. Where did this training come from?
Okay. It's kind of a tricky question to answer because I didn't do drama in high school. I didn't do the theater group. I wasn't in the AV club. I wasn't in any of that.
Your band?
I was in elementary school and junior high. I was in the string orchestra.
Okay.
So I do have a musical background in terms of I knew music theory and I knew that.
So you play violin or?
Played violin, exactly. Yeah. It wasn't until I was at LA Valley College that someone in a class asked me, by any chance, are you a singer? And I said, no, I'm not. I mean, I like to sing in the car and but he said, no, the reason I asked is because I have you in this one English class and I usually see you wearing this Morrissey t-shirt and stuff and I'm trying to start a band. So that was the birth of my music career right there. Okay. I looked like a lead singer, according to this guy.
And who is this that we're talking to?
That was our original guitar player, and what some people may or may not know is that Sweet and Tender Hooligans originally began as an original band. We were not a tribute band. We were not a cover band. We just had that in common, that we all liked the Smiths and we all liked Morrissey. So we had our own original songs, but once a year we would do the one show where we did only Morrissey Smith songs, just for laughs, just for fun. Like, oh, that could be cool. You could like wear your hair like him, and you could like wear his outfits. I'm like, oh, yeah, that's a good idea. Oh, whatever. So we just did that once a year, but the rest of the year we played our own original stuff. If you've never heard any of my original stuff, don't worry about it. You haven't missed anything. I'm no songwriter. I'm proud of the 20 songs that we wrote. I'm proud of 2 of them, and maybe someday they'll unearth somewhere. But you know, over time, my day job that just became way more realistic and way more like what I wanted to do. So I had made a decision pretty quickly that. You know, this original band thing, I think that's just not going to go anywhere. But this Morrissey tribute that we do, I don't mind doing that once a year. I'll come back once a year and do that. Once a year became 5 times a year, became 19 times a year, became traveling to Texas, to Seattle, to New York, to England, doing this Morrissey tribute now.
So I mean, is it accurate to say that the original songwriting, it was just hard to dedicate the time necessary to do that at the level you wanted to do it, and the Morrissey tribute was more like, this is just fun, and let's just go from that? Is that an accurate statement, or?
That end I really wasn't, you know, I'll just come right out. I just come out and say it. I'm no songwriter. I was no good at that. Since then, I've translated some of Morrissey's songs into Spanish, which we do perform once in a while.
I think we heard some before.
Yeah.
For the conference circuit.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I'm most proud of a song called "Let Me Kiss You," which when I say I'm proud of it, I mean the translation is as close to what the original lyrics are, because you can't always translate lyric for lyric in terms of like the structure of a song and whatnot. But yeah.
So now I want to ask you, who's coming to your shows? Who is this fan base? you know, we hear the usual narrative. You heard the news story Marissa played up here. Is it really as Latino as it's depicted in the media? Is there more variance there that we're not capturing? I'm just curious, who are these folks that are coming to your show?
It's definitely Latinos, that's for sure. And it's Latinos coming to Morrissey shows when he plays here. We were asked, in fact, just a couple weeks ago in Austin, Texas. We played at the Pachanga Latino Music Festival with where the headliner was Los Lobos.
Oh, cool.
You know, so we were asked to play in a Latino music festival, and we're just a Morrissey Smith's tribute. So
And all the bands from LA came out.
no, yeah.
Let's bring LA to town.
But you know that's what it's now become a deal where it's like Latinos identify or Morrissey's fans are identified as Latinos, so makes sense. Let's have a Morrissey Smith's tribute at this Latino music festival. Yeah.
So now I'm going to get to the questions that I'm sure you get all the time.
All the time.
So, you know, the New York Times had an article a few years back sort of questioning kind of this puzzled tone of the article as to why so many Chicanos are into Morrissey. They sort of drew the comparisons between experiences we have here in the States as, you know, people of Mexican descent and this sort of pale guy of Irish descent from Manchester. And so, I mean, in my own viewing of documentaries, some of which you are a part of, there's a couple of theories that float around. One is that Morrissey sort of represents a person caught between two worlds, right? His parents are Irish descent, yet he's born in England. And the parallel is very obvious to the Chicano experience, right? We are born in the United States, but we have this immediate connection, both geographical and emotional, to Mexico. Do you think there's something to that? Is there just some kind of parallel there that we can very easily gravitate towards? Curious what you think about that.
Yeah, in fact, in just that little news clip I did actually touch on that. I mean, growing up, my understanding of what it's like growing up of Irish descent in Northern England, in Manchester specifically, the Irish are gardeners. They're working class. They go to Catholic schools. They love soccer and boxing. You know, these are all parallels that are the same as like ours. Now, I threw that out as a theory way back, even before Morrissey started singing songs like "First of the Gang to Die" that were a little more LA centric. But I threw that out as one theory, one possibility. Maybe that's why we gravitate towards that guy, because we can sort of identify with that. But then there's also the other theory which we touched a little bit on earlier about Julio Iglesias. You know, we sort of gravitate to an emotional kind of singer. Vicente Fernandez, you know, the most emotional, the most emotional crooner that you could in the Spanish language, you know, that you could think of. Mexico's Pavarotti, really.
And you've drawn comparisons between Juan Gabriel's lyrics, and Morrissey's lyrics. So you think that tone of emotionality is...
I want to make sure that I also give credit to an author by the name of Gustavo Arellano.
Oh.
Ask a Mexican.
Ask a Mexican.
Author of Ask a Mexican. In fact, he devotes an entire chapter in his book of why do Latinos love Morrissey so much. So I get that question. He says that's second only to the question that he gets all the time. He says there's two questions I get all the time. There's, why do they wear their clothes at the beach? And why do they love Morrissey? But yeah, I mean, he breaks it down. He breaks it down in each category. And if you've yet to read it, it's called Ask a Mexican by Gustavo Arellano. But he does touch on those things about why we've always sort of gravitated to emotional lyrics. You know, I mean, it's when you look out into the audience of a Vicente Fernandez show, I mean, everyone's singing the words, and they're not just singing it; they're emoting it. You know what I mean? They're singing along with like tears in their eyes about those songs, just like they do at Morrissey shows. So, you know, there is that parallel.
To what extent do you think? I mean, we talked a little bit earlier about how Morrissey's sort of a notoriously reluctant interviewee, right? He doesn't give many public interviews. I guess he has spoken out a little bit more now, right? He's had a couple of comments about Margaret Thatcher and the royal wedding and stuff like that. But still, it's hard to really pin the guy down. So I'm wondering, to what extent do you think that the fact that Morrissey is kind of a little bit of a blank slate, how much of that do you think has aided his popularity with this particular demographic? Perhaps we see more of ourselves in him because he doesn't actively define himself? I'm just curious what you think about that. Like, is Morrissey a blank slate, and does that kind of help us see who we want to see in him?
Gosh, it's like now when he does speak up, he's speaking up through his own personal website.
Yeah.
So and he will speak up when something motivates him to speak up, like the recent passing of Margaret Thatcher, or
right.
the wedding of the royal family. Yeah, he'll just come right out and speak his mind. Yeah. There's something very attractive about the person that's mysterious, who only gives you just a little bit at a time, a little for. But then there was, for me, when I discovered his music, it wasn't just enough for me to be into the music. I had to know who this person was behind this music. So I sought after every. This is before the internet, kids. All right, you had to actually go and find old copies of Rolling Stone or British publications like the NME and stuff like that. You had to actually go sit there and research it at the library on microfiche and everything like that. And I did, and I wouldn't do that for. I would do that for certain homework assignments. This was stuff that I was actually being motivated to do on my own because I took such an interest in. So.
What other? I mean, I'm sure you interact with your fans at shows, after shows, when you're not doing shows.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just curious, what other bands sort of come along with Smiths Morrissey fandom? Sort of bands from the era of the Smiths and also more contemporary acts. I'm just curious, what kind of clusters together? Is there any kind of thematic unity to the kind of music that Smiths Morrissey fans are listening to?
Definitely. I would probably put, if there's one band, if there's one artist that you tend to find, if X equals Y, then Y probably equals. If a person is a Morrissey fan, they are probably a Depeche Mode fan, or they are probably a Cure fan. I would say those artists are probably at forefront. Now, this could be different in other parts of the world, but certainly the Southern California experience, no question. I think in those days that I was growing up loving K-Rock, Morrissey was Elvis Presley and Depeche Mode were the Beatles, without a doubt. That was the equivalent. The Cure were probably the Rolling Stones.
Yeah. So I have this. So I'm a psychologist by training. So I'm trained to always look for the simple, mundane, kind of unsexy answers to questions. And I've long had this theory that Morrissey did have a little bit of a period in the '90s of he didn't have a record label for a while. He wasn't putting out many records. 2004, I think, was when he made his big comeback, right, with You Are the Quarry.
Yes.
Is that what it was?
Mm-hmm.
Yet he was quite active in Los Angeles. He lived here, and he also toured the Southwest quite a bit. And I guess I'm just curious, when did you really start noticing this Chicano cult of Morrissey, and could it be explained by the fact that maybe he just gave us quite a bit of attention? Did he just hang out and tour? Because I remember growing up, he used to come to El Paso all the time, and I can tell you right now, no one came to El Paso when I was growing up. We used to get Scorpions and Rush. That's it. I like Rush.
Cool,
but that's all
though.
we get.
That's a good compliment.
The hooligans playing in El Paso. The hooligans playing in El Paso is just as loud and boisterous and lively.
And we love
when we play there.
Yeah, and we love you guys, and we love Morrissey in El Paso.
They're awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah.
They're awesome. But in your question about is it because he just gave us more attention? Funny thing is, and I've mentioned this before, when I first met Morrissey, it was a complete accident. By then I'm not doing a whole tribute band just yet. I think we're still kind of an original band, and I occasionally impersonate him and stuff. But that was one of the first questions he asked me. because I had him sign a CD, and he says, well, who do I make it out to? And I said, Jose. And he says, oh, okay, Jose, right? And I said, yeah. He said, oh, I know because I have a lot of Mexican fans here in Los Angeles. Do you have any? He said, do you have any idea why that is? So one of the first people to ask me that question was Morrissey himself. I think back then my answer was because it hadn't quite evolved into what it was just like even like 10 years later when I would meet him. But he said, but my answer back then was, it could just be virtue of numbers. There's just a whole lot of us here. So if you're popular here, chances are you're gonna be popular among a lot of Latinos. So there are a lot of Latino Dodger fans. Okay, it's because Latinos live in Los Angeles. So just kind of by accident, So, newsflash, there's a lot of Latino Dodger fans.
So the Dodgers are our local baseball team. Morrissey is our local singer-songwriter.
There you go.
Local British singer.
Right. Local British singer.
Local British singer. Yeah, from East LA. That's perfect. All right, so at the risk of upsetting everybody in the crowd here, there's been apparently Morrissey's doctors have recommended that he stop touring recently. He's had some issues, some health problems. He had pneumonia, I believe, recently. So he's having some issues. So I think that sort of served to remind me, and I'm speaking as a Morrissey fan, it served to remind me that this man is not going to be around forever. So I'm just curious, and again, I'm not trying to upset anybody. I'm not trying to get everybody up in arms. Although I'm sure there's a Morrissey song we can play to help you through these emotions.
You just need to bring me unsexy.
I know. I know.
That's
what
why
I do.
you're here.
That's what I do. So, who do you think could replace Morrissey? Who can sort of take on this role? See, I know I'm upsetting everybody.
Oh my gosh! Wow.
Is there anybody, or is this just a person? I'm gonna assume that the laughter means that there is nobody.
Listen, all right, nobody, right? And also, I'm
asking the tough question.
I'm also a little bit more positive and a little more optimistic when it comes to Morrissey. I really do think. Ironic. I'm optimistic and positive when it comes to Morrissey. Ironic, I know. But no, I honestly think that he's not done. I think that he's still got a few more, maybe decades left. I don't know. Look. I mean, Vicente Fernandez, still doing it, right? It's still packing the rooms and still singing his heart out, right? I see Morrissey doing that. I do. And now, as far as doctors' advice, I'm not his doctors. I don't know. But I do know. I do know that a guy like Morrissey loves that stage and loves that applause so much that he would never leave it.
So,
who could?
So you're envisioning sort of like, I'm trying to think of singer-songwriters who have had successful early, middle, and late stages in their career. So Bob Dylan, Leonard Cohen. This is sort of who you're envisioning that Morrissey could follow. That kind of trajectory.
David Bowie is still coming out with new albums and still performing live. The Rolling Stones, where Morrissey was at. Morrissey was at the Rolling Stones at the Staples Center, and they're still doing it. Yeah, I think when you spoke to when Morrissey was like doing interviews when he was younger, I think he spoke out saying, "Oh God, I don't want to be out there in my 50s, and that'll be embarrassing." But you change your mind. So I've lived a microcosm of what it's like to be in a real band. I've lived like a tiny little fraction. If being in a real band is a whole thing of cheesecake, I've lived like a slice of cheesecake, and it's really delicious. But I can tell you this: the idea of the bell that's not going to ring again for the next fight. That I don't want to think about that.
Yeah.
I don't ever want to think about that. It's no way. Yeah. So if he's anything like that, I know he's going to be in denial forever. About the bell that will not ring again.
I'm glad I could bring the entire room down. In my line of questions, that's what I do best. I am a Smiths and Morrissey fan after all, so it's only natural that I bring you all down. What is your band up to right now? Are you guys touring? I saw you have a show coming up early June.
Well, we just played Morrissey's birthday, May 22nd, which we do every year.
At the Sunset?
We always play it in LA.
Yeah.
Always. This year it was at the Fonda.
Okay.
And then you saw us in 09 for Morrissey's 50th. We gig every. I'd say we do like about 12 to 15 shows a year, either here or parts elsewhere, wherever we can. But every year, no matter what day of the week, May 22nd falls on, we do it. If it falls on a Monday, we're doing it on that Monday. If it falls on a Saturday, we're gonna sell out a big, huge place on Saturday. But we always pull out the extra stops for that 50th birthday show, or for the birthday show. We always pull out the stops. We bring in additional musicians. Sometimes we bring like a live string section for us for the songs. Like Every Day is Like Sunday. It's nice to have live strings on that. I think at the 50th that you saw, we had mariachis.
Yeah.
So we had mariachis open the show, and we even they even played mariachi versions of like First of the Gang to Die with music.
That's right.
And that was fun. So yeah, we will do that. Yeah, we'll do that every year on May 22nd. So, and then that. We've got a show on Sunday. It's free. So look us up on Facebook at Sweet and Tender Hooligans, and you'll see what we're playing. So it's all there.
So it's clear that we have Smiths and Morrissey fans in the crowd.
Are there any Smiths Morrissey fans here?
People are like, who is this?
Who's Morrissey?
Exactly.
Who's that guy?
So are there any questions in the crowd? I don't want to monopolize all the time here. We have a few minutes left. I'm wondering if anybody has a question for Jose here.
I have a question. I actually introduced you before you were here.
Oh, okay.
One thing that I noted in your performance was that you smiled quite a bit.
Okay.
And I think part of the fascinating, we're always talking about how Morrissey is so emotional, and that's why people like him. But he's also very formal. I mean, he's not swinging around all across the stage. I mean, everything's kind of a little. When he takes his shirt off, I don't want to say it's planned, but it's not spontaneous. But you seem really spontaneous. I mean, was your act? Was it always part of your act to just do the music, but to just do whatever you did as a singer? You know what I mean? Like it's a tribute band, but you're not a tribute to the entire kind of affect. I mean, is that something that you think about,
that's kind of something that I think that's just evolved over time. Maybe there ought to be a tribute band support group that I could talk to. But I do wonder if after a time it just becomes your own band. And if after a time you say, well, yes, I'm playing those songs and I'm singing like that person, but I wonder if if you talked to say an Elvis impersonator, who
Elvis.
He's a good friend. Elvis is a good friend.
I love him.
He's fantastic. But and Elvis is not really your traditional Elvis impersonator. He puts his own spin on it. In fact, as long as you sidetrack there, that's how we came up with the moniker the Mexican Morrissey. That's how we came, because we were on the same bill.
That's awesome.
So we said the Mexican Elvis meets the Mexican Morrissey. I'm like, let's go with that, So anyway, but with an Elvis impersonator, I'll get that. With an Elvis impersonator, I wonder if these guys that have been doing it for a while. The only guy that comes to mind right now is Trent Carlini, but I'll ask Trent Carlini one day. Does he now feel like, well, these songs are almost kind of mine, so I'm going to deliver them this way? I don't know. I can just only speak from when I'm out there. I'm sort of lost in the moment. I'm lost in that song, and I'm in a room full of people that love these songs as much as I do, and the emotion that comes out is, I know, isn't this song awesome? That's what's sort of coming out when I perform.
Just a quick follow-up.
Sure.
Do you pretty much record the moment he releases a single or something? Does the band just sit down and say, okay, we're going to learn this one?
It's tough because there's 5 of us. So there's 5 guys with 5 differing opinions of which songs would be great to do. But
every time a new record comes out, you are sitting down and figuring out which song.
We'll say, the funny thing was when the song "First of the Gang to Die" came out, there was no album yet. This was a new song that he was just starting to perform live, and when we started playing it, this is the funniest thing ever. One of our guitarists said, "God, it's so nice to have another hit on our hands." So anyway, but no, we just decide we get about 20. We get to do about 23 to 24 songs a show. That's about how many we get. So I always try to pick the 10 that are what I call the standards, the ones that you have to play. There's a city ordinance that if you're a Doors tribute band, you have to do "Light My Fire." You know, I think you know they'll revoke your tribute band license if you don't. So there are those songs, those 10 songs that are you got to do those songs that we have. So that pretty much only leaves about a room for about 12 or 13 for us to kind of go, hey, what songs haven't we done in a while, or what have we been getting a lot of requests for, or what is the song that I really, really love, and I don't care how the rest of you feel, I effing love this song so much, so let's do that one. It's a combination of things, really. So. You started, Nikki, you started.
Well, I just have a really quick thing on your question, just from my brief experience as a music critic. I think when it comes, because I've actually written about but tribute bands. I think the thing with like someone like you and like with Smiley and all of that is like tribute bands work on two levels. They're a tribute to the artist, but they're also a tribute to the fans. And I think that when people come to the show, they're going to see you. Like, they're going to see Jose. I mean, no one is going to see the Sweet and Tender Hooligans to see Morrissey. They're going to celebrate Morrissey with you as a performer. And, like, you are a vehicle for Morrissey, but at no point, I think, does anyone walk in that room and think that you are going to try and be Morrissey, because the whole point is that no one can be Morrissey, and so hence we are, like with someone like Dred Zeppelin, for instance. Like, you know, Dred Zeppelin's popular because a lot of, you know, the joke is like, you know, the Rosses, you know, they commune, they get stoned and they listen to Led Zeppelin, and so it's like the experience of going to see Dred Zeppelin is to celebrate that aspect of the band. That this is something that they can like conjure in a group of people, and it's like you're going to celebrate the experience of listening to something collectively. And so I'm not rebutting or arguing. But I don't think that people walk into tribute bands expecting to see Jim Morrison or expecting to see Morrissey or expecting to see Led Zeppelin. Like it's like going to Disneyland and like going on Space Mountain. You're not really getting on a spaceship, but you're having a space-like experience in a place that celebrates excitement and space. You know what I mean?
When you're in Disney's California Adventure, you're not really in California.
You're not really.
You're in the tribute band.
I mean, and if we're gonna get real deep with it, it's some Baudrillard simuli and simulacrum. I mean, a tribute band is like, it's not. I think people would be disturbed if they showed up and tried to impersonate Morrissey, because the whole point of going to see a tribute band. A whole point of going to see someone emulate someone who is not the real person is like a level of devotion that, like, for instance, no offense, I've never seen you play. I love Morrissey, but I don't love him to the degree that I am. Well, I will now, though. I'm going your free show. I'm psyched on you.
Okay.
But like,
it's free and it's worth every penny.
I'm going. But so that's a really long answer to like. I don't think that like people. I don't think the experience. I think the experience is the experience, and the experience is not to have like a Smith's night replicated. It's to like come together and have these like musical pheromones.
It's to be in a room full of people that all love the same thing.
They all love the same thing.
Yeah.
Exactly. And you are like, for the night, you are the Sean. You are leading the journey.
There you go.
There's a question right here. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'm dying to respond, but maybe not as the place. Because I think part of the tribute band attraction is there's a nostalgia thing. I mean, these are bands that don't exist, and I think if or don't no longer exist, right? The Smiths. I think a lot of us. I go to Jose see me. I've been to a lot of his shows, and there are several other Smiths and tribute bands. I can count them. They exist. There's about 5 or 10 currently right now that actively play in LA, and I've been to almost, I try to go to all of them, and to me, I think what's very shared is that, okay, yeah, we know he's not Morrissey, but I'm going to tell, I think the first thing I ever told you was I can close my eyes and imagine I'm at a Smith show, because that's the closest we're ever going to get to actually being at a Smith show, because the Smiths are never going to play again.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think there is that sort of element that we do want to have that experience, to celebrate. And I also think there is an element of the singers embodying some sort of Morrissey. I mean, you take your shirt off and you gyrate the way he does. Another guy spells viol on his chest. So I think there is that, from Maladjusted, the guy who played at the Smiths. So I think there is that sort of intentionality of, I'm going to embody, and I think impersonation is, I think, a right way, because that is, I think, for me at least, part of the experience. Sure.
I know you studied stuff. I personally don't view, would you compare it to a sort of like aesthetic of like drag? Would you like performative in that sense? I don't mean the Judith Butler performative, like the gender being gender. You would, as like a, because see, I've never envisioned it as a drag sort of experience.
Yeah.
But you would view it that way?
I think in some ways there is, I mean, not drag in sort of a queer way.
No,
But I think if I do Morrissey, there is a queer element to it.
Well, obviously, but
I think it is, because it's a performance, it's an embodiment. I think
Okay.
that, I've never, I went to go see the Bishopets, right?
Mhm.
They have an all-female playing, but there is a sense of embodiment, and we are going to inhabit and embody this band, right? And I think that that's kind of the coolness of it. Yeah, we know it's not Morrissey and the Smiths up there, but
that's interesting.
I think it's pretty, but that's why I think I've been wanting to talk to you anyway, so it's cool. But anyway, my question isn't, I mean, it is about tribute bands and shows, but I think I wanted to ask Jose more about some of your other endeavors. I'm interested in your radio show that you do online, right? The Breakfast with the Smiths World of Morrissey. And as a sort of other space that you create for sharing these experiences, right? I mean, folks who maybe can't go see the Hooligans.
When Indie 103.1 went off the air of FM, there was a collective of us who said, well, we'll still keep it going as long as it's online. And the parent company has said, yeah, we'll keep it going. Doesn't cost us anything to just leave it on the air. And one thing that they learned was there were a lot of people that were tuning in to Indie 103.1 online anyway, even when it was on FM, because depending on what part of LA you weren't getting good enough reception for it. So as it works out, and now in today's age of smartphones, you now have access to this radio station. And well, anyway, before they went off of FM, they said just about every major market out there, every major radio market has a breakfast with the Beatles.
Yes.
Like you can go to any, just point on the map to Topeka, Kansas. Topeka, Kansas, there's a breakfast with the Beatles or a morning with the Beatles or something like that. So they were saying, well, we're an indie station. If we had a breakfast with the show, what would it be? And they said, well, it would probably be the Smiths. So they asked me to host it. And that was about 4 years ago, and I thought it was going to last 4 weeks. Here I'm 4 years later, and I'm still doing it Sundays and Wednesdays. So, yeah.
So I guess the question I had then is, how have you seen, now that you're online and now that you take requests by Twitter, how have you seen the fan base grow? And I think it's cool that you do the show so that it actually is breakfast in England.
Well, I took the same elements that I loved about listening to K-Rock, where you had those DJs that gave you that personal approach that said call the request lines and put in your song. And now in the age of Twitter, I can say tweet me your song request right now, and you don't have to be in Los Angeles. You can be in Thailand, you can be in England, you can be in anywhere in South America, and that's where we're pulling listeners from, everywhere.
So I'm going to close with, I think my one brilliant idea that I just came up with is we have to find the Mexican Johnny Marr. And put you guys in a room and see what happens. Maybe we can get the Mexican Smiths reunited. So it's 2:30. We're going to have a coffee break out on our patio. I encourage you all to stick around. Everybody's going to be here, so the conversation can continue. I know there were a few more hands that were raised. Please continue having the discussion along with coffee right on our patio, and then we'll resume again at what time?
3. Okay.
So 2:30, caffeine time. Everybody's sticking around, so please stick around and keep the conversation going. Thank you very much.
Just fun.
There you go.
All right.
Yeah.
We'll be in touch.
Yeah, definitely follow me.
So we're just going to have a short, broader panel discussion maybe for the next half hour or so before moving on for Jose's performance. And part of what I want to do with this is just ask a couple questions to get us started off, to get the panel talking to each other a bit more as a whole about emo, what it means, how it moves as it travels, as we saw in our description for the event. We'll also open it up to a broader Q&A, so keep in mind what questions you might have for the panel as well as we continue to interrogate these notions of emo. So the first question I have is just very broadly, what are some of the unifying factors among Mexican and Los Angeles emos? We've talked a little bit about some of the factors that separate them. As Marissa's first presentation told us, Mexican emos tend to act structurally, whereas Los Angeles emos tend to act a little, and Morrissey's band specifically, tend to act a little bit more ejectically. Nikki talked a little bit about the sense of feeling othered that she felt growing up in LA, which is something that Jose also attested to. So I wanted to hear a little bit more about those experiences, but also get a sense of what unifies emos.
I did plenty of talking.
I don't have anything more to say than what I already said, but I know that you have played in Mexico, so I would be curious to hear about your different experiences there, but I just want to put that out there. I know that I just like stole your... Oh, no, I cock blocked Nikki on the mic.
No.
Oh, okay. Well, no,
Yeah, it's a good question. I would, before it's over, though, like to offer, not maybe at this moment, but I have another theory as to why Morrissey is very popular among Mexican-American Angelinos, but we can do that near the end.
but even the emo culture, you got your emo kids, and then you got your Latino emo kids, your Latino kids.
Yeah.
There's that subculture within that subculture, I guess. Certainly when I was growing up, I mean, it was it's still pretty conservative, you know. You're not if you're a male, you're not supposed to act effeminate. In fact, it's not cool to be effeminate, you know. I mean, you've got to be macho. In fact, macho means, well, there you go. But you've got to be macho, and so these goth kids, these emo kids, yeah, I mean they're going to be objects of ridicule.
Okay, I have to jump in now.
Yeah, go ahead.
So you brought up a really spectacular point, and one of the reasons I think that Morrissey and the Smiths are so popular in Los Angeles and with the Mexican American community, and I can speak to this specifically because my mother's family is from the Southwest, but we have been in the United States since sort of like the 40s off and on. And there's this culture here, it's like kind of like low riding car culture, like Art Laboe, like this sort of like oldies. There's like this sort of affectation where it's like the look, and Morrissey has like a very specific look that is, I mean, look at, you're beautiful, look at you with your flower and your red lipstick. I mean, that's a very like, and hello, I mean, your pompadour and your like smart shirt, and you got your white shirt underneath. I mean, that's a very like, I mean, my grandpa wears the white shirts, you know, and you know, like a wife beater, you know what I mean? And speaking in with the effeminate thing is like, my grandfather, he was I don't want to call him a cholo because it was the 40s. He was like a pachuco, okay? And there was like a lot of attention to like your physicality, like the way you look, like you ironed your shirts, you ironed your pants. Like my grandmother really wanted to look put together. There was no mess, and there's like a very 1940s, 50s cleanliness, sort of like sterility that is like maybe familiar. I can't speak to the Southwest specifically, but within Los Angeles, it's very familiar to like the Mexican American community that has been here since the war. And there's this whole tie-in with like the Zoot Suit riots, and like one of the things about my grandfather is and I think that this has to do with a lot of the like Mexican American men in general, is there's this dual culture of like machismo, but also this sort of effeminance with appearance and looking clean and put together and like, you know, obviously my mother's whole side of the family is Catholic. Well, obviously we're Catholic, very Mexican Catholic, very like, and I think that no one has brought up the Catholicism, and I think one of the major reasons Mexicans love Morrissey is because he's Catholic, and there's this sort of identification with his like religious background and Catholicism. I mean, let's be real, it's real performative, you know, it's real about appearance, it's real about like the drama and the morbidity of mortality and life and the sadness of just like, and so much of Mexican culture is rooted in like a oral tradition of storytelling, like La Lorena and the river and the children and like the Mother Mary, and like there's this like Catholicism and Mexican American Los Angeles culture is very entrenched in narrative and sadness and drama and I mean telenovelas. I mean, it's just a dramatic, colorful culture. And you know, The Simpsons made a joke about like in Catholic heaven, it's the best heaven because you get to hang out with all the Irish people and the Italian people and the Mexican people, and you're really loud and you eat great food and everyone's sexy and wearing a tight dress when they're 80 and they have awesome hair.
So my tribute band will live on.
So all I'm saying is like one of the things I didn't hear mentioned today was the physicality and the sort of like visual identity that Morrissey has that is familiar. And also this dual effeminance paired with this like real, I mean, Catholicism, they worship Mary. I mean, that she's a woman, but also, you know, they're macho.
Can I just build on what you just said? Because one thing that I tried to make a list of why I thought maybe Mexicans like Morrissey, and also tried to make a list of why it's surprising, because it doesn't seem surprising to me anymore. But death. I mean, I've been reading Octavio Paz's Letters of Solitude, and you know the whole festivals and things like that. I mean, how does the presence of death in the songs? I mean, there aren't many pop songs that actually
talk about death.
They have death. You know, the death of the singer or the death of someone that they care for.
It's a major part of what I think is attractive about it, like Hang the DJ and this death of, I mean, this like I killed my girlfriend.
The father must be killed.
Yeah, this sort of, and like in Mexico, like Alarma magazine, like there's a sort of like connection to death in Catholicism and the Mexican culture that is evident in Morrissey's work that is not so evident in, say, Christina Aguilera or Maroon 5 and or even Nirvana. You know, Nirvana is like living in the muck, but Morrissey's like in heaven with God after I kill myself, because there is a heaven. I will reign with a golden cup, you know?
I was just going to point out a little earlier that the father of the family in the Telemundo clip, he says, by way of explanation, it's like, oh yeah, he's a really snazzy dresser, right? Like part of why he loves Morrissey. So just a bit of support for what he said.
Yeah, I think, if I can point to what my mom likes about him, it's that he is a snazzy dresser, and dresses like the traditional crooner, you know. So yeah.
Frank Sinatra or something.
But we started talking about you know, as far as being effeminate, or you know, I know that what I always thought was really strange. When I lived such a sheltered life in Anglo Burbank growing up, that when I did go out into the world, so to speak, I think one of the things that really fascinated me was not just, well, you know, it was unusual to meet a gay person, because it's not something that was, you know, nobody was out in you know, growing up in high school in those days, but when you met a Latino gay person, that was exceptionally unusual, because it was not cool.
Yeah.
It would not be cool. I mean, my mom would not be cool with that. If I had just having a friend that was gay, that would not be cool with my mom, you know. So I remember meeting, finally meeting friends that were out, that I can only imagine what their experience must have been like. It's one thing to be in the closet, it's a whole other thing to be in a closet in a culture where it's not cool to be that way.
Do you think part of, the thing about Morrissey being gay, which he hasn't, is that he's also quite macho as well. He has some Irish blood, English heart, he's kind of,
and he does touch on macho themes as well too.
It's that dichotomy within the Mexican American culture, which I think also still goes back to Catholicism, which is that there is this sort of macho idea of what
this expectation
of what a man is like within a culture that is very obsessed with Mary and the birth and the virgin and these very strict sort of gender ideas, but also there's this really fun fluidity in it where it's not, it's actually, this is really interesting. I hate to steal this from you. So on Jersey, no I don't, you're right. On Jersey Shore, one of the things that someone wrote about, I think it was on Rookie or Jezebel or something, was about how what was so interesting is these Italian American men who were on the one hand really macho and disgusting, but on the other hand spent so much time preening and getting dressed and spraying their bodies with Axe and ironing their shirts, and it's this sort of it's this I feel like Morrissey touches on an internal conflict within that culture that already exists.
Yeah. It's got to be a real. It's got to be a real shock to some of these parents seeing their kids doing the whole lipstick thing, especially in a culture where that's not cool.
Yeah.
So I think today's emo kid has it easy compared to when it was not cool, and that would have been unacceptable.
One thing that struck me, that strikes me at your shows is, the story the Pachuco and the Chicano rockabilly presence, which I totally get, and the kind of history of Chicano Mexican American music. And I'm just curious, if do you see that in Mexico? There's a different musical genealogy, but what do they look like? Do they look like the kids that we saw in the video, or?
Yeah, kind of. When I think what is really what surprised my bandmates when we played in Monterrey, Mexico, what surprised them was looking out into the crowd and seeing what would kind of pass for Anglo-looking people, because I don't think people quite, well, at least people in California, maybe they do, maybe they don't, but but certainly my bandmates were puzzled by it. But you either have European features or Native American features when you're from Mexico or South America, and in some cases African features. But I think that people are so used to seeing people with more Native American features here in Southern California, because they're the ones that maybe come out here to do working class hard labor, manual labor, and so I remember it saying, if we took a picture here in Monterey and we passed it around back home and said, where was this picture taken? They would say, oh, that was the Viper Room, right? So I thought that's kind of what we found.
That's a really interesting point about the people that come out that migrate are the people who are the lower class within their country of origin, and so there's no need to leave if you're a European-looking Mexican because you are of the upper class.
You come from good. You come from a good family.
Yeah, absolutely. I never thought that's really interesting.
It was pretty wild, and that's some of the better paying shows were in places like that.
Wow.
And that's one of the theories of that fuels. One of the theories about what fuels the violence against emo, as I mentioned in passing in my talk, that there's a real class distinction between emo kids in Mexico tend to be those kids, wealthy, middle class, with more European features, which is really different from the metal kids or the punk rock kids. There's real class. Those groups are separated by class, even more so than in the States.
This issue of class gets at one of my questions I have that also relates in terms of race, the sorts of affects that emos have. And here I'm thinking a little bit about Jose Munoz, who was speaking on campus a couple of months ago about brown and down, the idea of brownness as this depressive position, or work that's been done with the relationship between melancholy and race. Mm-hmm. And so I want to think more about these negative feelings or negative affects in relation specifically to class, and then also race and ethnicity.
So it's
So
that
just
sounds like a really interesting statement.
Yeah,
but
but so
like,
like some of your ideas of like what distinguishes, like what Nikki was saying about how when you're in high school and you feel sad, you want to fit in. How is that feeling different from, say, what like a Mexican or a Latino emo is feeling? Mm-hmm. How is that sadness different, I guess?
Boys don't cry. You know, I mean that's I think. Why, and that's another song that my mom liked, you know, because of the sentiment, because it was because it's about a song, it's, you know, about being so sad over the loss of not having this person in your life anymore, and you got to keep up that, you know, tough front because boys don't cry, and that's a that's a very Latino sentiment, you know. You know, you don't show your emotion, much less cry over losing somebody.
But there's also the Tears of the Clown phenomenon, which is like the cholo thing. I'm sorry, I hate to interrupt you, but I think that's not entirely true, actually. I think there's a whole culture here within gang members, specifically when I was growing up and I knew some gang members. There is like, and this is what I was talking about earlier about like the effeminate nature of like the internal dichotomy within like the Mexican American like teenager, especially with the males that I knew. There's this idea that you don't cry, but you hold that kind of as like a badge, so that when you do, it's like there's a lot more crying going on with like, and I think that that's what's appealing about Morrissey is that I seem to listen on. I'm like, come up here.
I have 1,000 questions.
Come talk. I think that like Latino culture does cry though. I mean, that's why it's so dramatic. It's it's so performative. Yeah. It's like the idea, it's like the pantomime of not crying and then crying is what makes the pantomime so much more.
I think the Latino male is more likely to cry over the lyrics of a song
than anyone else.
It's
the Tears of the Clown.
Someone has got to have done a study. Mm-hmm. Someone has to have, but I'm certain because
it's all the hurt.
There's something, right.
It's
there's
all
something
the hurt,
about
it's all the sadness. It's all the trials. I mean, I'm speaking glibly in terms of like cliches. It's like the watching your neighbor get shot in the street. It's the all of that is like it's brought. You know, you're tough. Your trial. Your emotions are expressed through this person. That you cannot express within your own culture, but expressing it collectively is allowed.
So that is the argument that Bill Jones makes in that movie, Is It Really So Strange, that you're featured in. I mean, he says that his main argument or his main explanation for why Morrissey is so popular with Latinos is because he is like allows Latinos to cathect their non-normative sexual feelings, right? It's like you can be queer, have queer feelings, but those are unacceptable in your culture, and so you can be a Morrissey fan, and that allows you a way to kind of
like it gives you permission.
Right, but so that's his argument, and then, but you know, I find that, I guess, a little condescending, or I'm not sure how I feel about that argument. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it, because it's like, Latinos don't know how to feel these feelings on their own, so they need this white man to come over from England to give them permission.
No, I don't think that's. No, I don't.
Okay,
think
so
that's
help me wrap my head around that.
I think it's like when you go to a tribute band and everyone's together in the room and you're collectively experiencing something that you know everyone else in the room shares with you. It's a chance to, I use the word commune a lot because I feel like commune is a good placeholder for like, when a group of people go to a football game or a group of people go to something that is like a large event where everyone has the same goal, literally, you know, It's like the same as like when you go to your show, you know that you're gonna, if I were to go to your show and I were to throw my arm around some Mexican like sad kid and be like, this is fucking awesome, and we both started crying, it's accepted, it's a safe place when you walk in the door.
You see that. You see that when Morrissey.
It's a celebration, not a condensation, I think.
When Morrissey played at Hollywood High School recently, he took a couple of moments into his show to just sing a cappella one of his songs, and to hear that entire room, this high school auditorium, in unison, singing his song and singing it from the heart, is unlike any experience I've ever been a part
That's
of.
magic, and that's what music does. That's magic.
It was Asleep.
Oh.
It was the song Asleep.
He did that at Staples too, and the whole place.
He did that. That happened during, and he was doing "Please, Please, Please Let Me Get What I Want." Yeah, it was amazing.
That's what he does. That's I mean, and that's it. That's what
So,
he does.
so to Bill's point, it's here is a situation where it's okay to do that. It's almost being granted permission to go ahead and take that macho facade and put it away right now. It's not needed here.
Thank you. You have a really great way of verbalizing what I can't say. So I think within the Mexican community, I think that the performance of putting aside the macho facade is its own thing. I think that it's part within the culture. There is this understanding that we do hurt and we do cry, and that's the tears of the clown, and that we have this like mask. It is the macho culture, but the idea of taking the mask off is within the culture itself too. Of like putting down the mask and being your internal feminine self, because there's an understanding. If you talk to like my grandpa, a Mexican man, like he knows that within the Mexican culture there's machismo. I mean, machismo is not like this untalked about thing. Like it's almost like a caricature of, like if my dad would get angry, he'd be like, oh, I'm getting a little machismo. My dad's a white man. But it's like, but I mean, but when he says that,
So we're talking a lot about male fandom, I think, right? Latino, macho. And part of my work on thinking about Morrissey fans is thinking how male and female fans express their fandom in different ways. And what I noticed in this past, I went to this Miss Morrissey convention back at the end of April. I noticed a lot of women who look like this beautiful young girl here with the flower, that rockabilly look. And so I'm curious to think about if we're talking about sort of men feeling okay to be expressive, of guys feeling okay to be a little fluid in their gender expression and their sexuality, of guys laying down the mask. How can we think about the ways that women Morrissey fans, because there are a lot of women fans who followed his tour bus up to his house and who'll sit around and they'll get the tattoos. And just in my own conversations and sort of circulations of these fandom spaces at the tribute bands, at the karaoke nights, a lot of female fans. I'd be interested in seeing how the panel can maybe address what are the differences and how in the gendered expression of fandom, specifically in Morrissey fandom. I mean, girls try to get up on stage and touch you all the time in the same way that guys do.
And I hate every minute of it.
So what is the difference? How can we name it, or can we name it, or is it different?
I don't know. I mean, what I've seen is it's no. I don't want to say and I'm not trivializing it. But I see that it's the same type of adulation that you see Justin Bieber fans get over, their guy. It's not any one. I don't know that it's anything exceptionally different because I think we gravitate towards the male side because it's so very unusual for a male singer to evoke this kind of feeling through these tough-looking macho Latino guys. In fact, I don't know anybody that does that. But you can pretty much pick any male singer out there, and there are girls that react that way that they do.
So it's coming from something different.
Yeah, I think so. But when you talk about why do people want to run up on stage and hug Morrissey, I don't know. I mean, maybe I could be kidding myself. I just know that why do I want to run up and hug him? I want to run up and hug him because I want to thank him for every one of those songs that he gave me. And I think, I mean, at least I think anyway, that everybody that goes to rush that stage to hug Morrissey, male or female, is feeling that. Now there may be some element of like, you know, you're a very attractive man, and you know, with the ladies that do come up, that maybe there is an element of like, oh my God, you're hot, and I love your music, you know. So it's not just Justin Bieber, oh my God, you know, you're cute and sexy.
Oh, please don't compare Morrissey to Bieber.
But Morrissey's female fans that go to run up and hug him, and Justin Bieber's female fans that go up to hug him. You follow what I'm saying? Like there's an element of I find you attractive, and there's an element of your words and your songs mean the world to me, you know. So that's been my observation from, you know, from my vantage point.
Yeah.
More questions from the audience? I'd like to take at least one more if we have time.
Can I just say something to address the last question, which has nothing to do with Latino because I'm not Latino, but when I was in high school and the Smiths were still making music, I don't think the Smiths were necessarily seen as a band that was geared toward male emotionality or sexuality or anything in particular. I mean, they were just another kind of pop band, but you know, a really good pop band. You know, I think it's really in Morrissey's solo career where you really get the idea that he's writing songs that are really about a particularly male experience. I was actually surprised to read a very early review in Rolling, like one of these Rolling Stone, like, you know, things that just said, you know, the Smiths write songs about gay longing, you know, and I was like, well, actually, you know, in high school nobody ever said that. You know, they were just, so most of my friends that like the Smiths were girls, you know, and actually, from what I understand, Morrissey's not particularly popular in gay culture at large. You know, it's like he's such a weird figure. He's not necessarily. Yeah, it's just so hard to pin him down. So, yeah, I don't know if that adds anything to it.
So much of his allure is the machismo.
Yeah.
And I don't know how like easily that is like historically been welcomed into those conversations. I think obviously that's changing now that we're like sitting on this panel, but also a lot like that's really interesting what you said about, because I experienced Morrissey for the first time in the 90s. I was born in 1980, so
He had just gone solo.
He had just gone solo, and I have no memory or experience of what the initial reaction was to him. But when I got to him, it was like me and all my little girlfriends thought he was cool because he looked cool and he sounded cool, and you know there was no real like academic inquiry into why I like this person. And also, I think a part of it is like another, I think like a really simple and obvious answer to why he's so popular in Mexican American culture is. It doesn't answer why he continues and he stays, but I think initially, like, the more Mexican kids listen to him, the more they're going to tell their friends about him, and the more their friends are going to listen to him, and the more, you know.
And the more we pass them on to our younger siblings.
Yeah.
Because it's not just.
It becomes embedded in the culture.
Yeah. I think not just Morrissey, but a lot of these. There's something to be said about bands that outlast, you know, that outlast the time when they were playing on the radio. And when you think that there are 13-year-olds today that are still discovering the Smiths, or still discovering The Cure, or still discovering Depeche Mode at 13, that says a lot to the longevity of what, you know, it speaks to the longevity of something that this emotion is timeless.
Third generation.
Yeah.
Morrissey's.
I have a question that I've always wanted to ask, actually. I just realized, you know, when You Are the Quarry, he actually starts to put out songs that directly address Latino lifestyle in Southern California. I mean, how did that feel when you're, you know, this person that you idolize so much is starting to write songs that are describing, or at least themes that he's describing your lifestyle?
No, very prideful. In fact, when he played at the Greek Theater one time, and he said to the audience, "It's good to be home." I felt more civic pride that day than at any Dodger game I've ever been to. Home! Did you hear what he said? He said home. So yeah. But yeah, there was an element of, you know, yeah, because You Are the Quarry. Yeah, he finally did sort of write an LA-centric song and started.
Well, there were a
singing
couple
about
too. There's that one about leave him alone with his methadone. It's
Teenage Dad on His Estate.
Yeah, wasn't that,
yeah.
Because the outro then is in Spanish, I think.
Oh, Don't Make Fun of Daddy's Voice.
That's the one, yeah.
Don't Make Fun of Daddy's Voice. Yeah. But
Anyway,
well,
So I think we're about ready to hear some Morrissey. How do you guys feel about that?
Yeah.
All right, let's have Jose's performance. Let's thank our panelists. Thank you so much.
just get my guitar. Talk amongst yourselves. I'm just gonna get my guitar over here. Saying that I'm not the guitar player of the band. I'm just the singer. So I hope that you don't see why. Before, when I used to do these things, this was before YouTube or anything like that. So if I do really awful, that's it. It's forever. So please be kind. If I do something really awful, don't post it on YouTube. You know? Just tell everybody, oh my God, it was sensational.
Is there a Smith song that's pertinent to this life event?
I'm also very limited on what songs I know how to play.
Okay.
So that's the thing. So I can't even do requests. I apologize. I can't. It's really only what I know. So let's see. Typically when I do these things, I just play whatever song comes to mind. All right, so.
We're really missing you, we're really missing you. And you've only just gone. Oh, you punched and fell, then you felt embarrassed. My heart goes out to you. So I offered love and it was not required. Oh, what else can I do? What else can I do? We're really missing you, we're really missing you. And you've only just gone. So Sonny, send at least one thoughtful letter. My heart goes out to you. Tell us all how things are so much better. My heart is left with you. What else can I do? They've not forgiven you. And you're not even wrong. Oh, with your jean belt wrapped around your arm, oh Sonny, my heart goes out to you. And with the needle pressed onto tight skin, Sonny, I cry when I see where it's taken you. I'm here, I won't move. I'm here, I won't move. I'm here, I will not
Thank you. Again, I'm only limited to the songs I know how to play. That one is called Sunny. Let's see.
come on to my house. Come on and do something new. I know you love one person so why don't you love too? Something, give a little something to my love life, to my love life, my love life. Oh. I know you love one person, so why don't you love too? Oh, love too. And give a little something, give a little something to my love life, to my love life, my love life. Oh. I know you love one person, so why don't you love two? Oh, love two. I give up, 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 I give up.
Yeah, so oh, okay, here's one. Over the years, I've translated some of Morrissey songs into Spanish, and there's an artist by the name of Miguel M, who has translated 2 of his songs into Spanish. There's Light That Never Goes Out and Every Day Is Like Sunday, which occasionally we perform, but I want to just make sure I give credit to, he's the one who translated those. This next one I'd like to do for you is one that I've translated, and the song is called Lost, Perdido.
Aviones en el cielo marcan solo una palabra, un puño de arena, y todos entienden, todos están perdidos, sin admitir que están perdidos. Aviones en el cielo marcan solo una palabra, un puño de arena, y todos entienden, todos están perdidos, sin admitir que están perdidos. Oh, oh. Y si te veo burles de mí, estoy perdido. Si te veo y te digo que yo te he visto, no te burles de mí, estoy perdido.
I feel like every performer should be forced to do.
Girlfriend in a coma, I know, it's really serious. There were times when I could have murdered her, but you know I would hate anything to happen to her. No, I don't want to see her. Do you really think she'll pull through? Do you really think she'll pull through? Girlfriend in a coma, I know, baby, it's serious. There were times when I could have strangled her, but you know I would hate anything to happen to her. Would you please let me see her? Do you really think she'll pull through? Do you really think she'll pull through? Let me whisper my last goodbyes. I know it's serious.
Marissa?
No, sorry, my
Oh, okay.
husband can't use the iPad.
Panic on the streets of London, panic on the streets of Birmingham. I wonder to myself, could I never be sane again? The lead side streets that you slipped down, I wonder to myself. Hopes may rise on the grass fields, but I'm buying on safely, so you run down to the safety of the town. But there's panic on the streets of Carlisle, Dublin, Dundee, Humberside. I wonder to myself. Burn down the
the guitar player. Alright, I got it. Here we go.
Shyness is nice and shyness can stop you from doing all the things in life you'd like to. Shyness is nice and shyness can stop you from doing all the things in life you'd like to. So if there's something you'd like to try, if there's something you'd like to try, ask me, I won't say no, how could I? Coyness is nice and coyness can stop you from saying all the things in life you'd like to. So if there's something you'd like to try, if there's something you'd like to try, ask me, I won't say no, how could I? Spending warm summer days indoors, writing frightening verse to a book to go in Luxembourg. Ask me, ask me, ask me, ask me, ask me, ask me, because if it's not love, then it's the bomb, the bomb, the bomb, the bomb, the bomb, the bomb, the bomb that will bring us together. Ask me, because if it's not love, then it's the bomb, the bomb, the bomb, the bomb, the bomb, the bomb, the bomb that will bring us together. Si no es amor, es la bomba, then it's the bomb that will bring us together. So ask me, ask me, ask me, ask me, ask me, ask me, oh.
If you guys want to give the encore cheer.
I don't know if I know one, but obviously not. Oh, wow. Let's see.
Up at the sun, it said please keep away, and so when I ran you see I'll never, oh I'll never learn, I'll never learn. Chapter 1 again. Here I go again. I found the fountain of youth and I fell in. How could I ever win? I will never learn. I'll never learn. Why should I mind? Why should I care? I'll never learn. I'll never learn.
That's all I know.
Thank you so much for that beautiful performance. Before we get started on the reception, I just wanted to say a couple thank yous. One, most of all, to José Maldonado for that beautiful performance. Also to each of our panelists, Marissa, Brian, Nikki, and Miguel. I also want to thank the Chicano Studies Research Center, especially the Center Director, Chan Noriega. I'd also like to thank the UCLA Diversity Symposium Planning Committee, who made our event part of their month-long series of events, and the Los Angeles Tennis Center for this beautiful space. I especially want to thank Rebecca here in the back, who was such a pleasure to work with. And I also want to give another round of applause to Marissa for bringing us together today to talk about emos and Morrissey. On behalf of emos everywhere, thank you. In Morrissey we trust. And now let's drink some wine and have some snacks.